Chapter 10-11. Together? Where are we going? Xianxia was taken aback. He turned around and sat down. He wasn't in the mood to enjoy sitting on the heavenly horse's carriage. His eyes were fixed on the direction the heavenly horse was flying in. It was the purple halo spinning in the air. He instantly knew where he was going. Brother Yu. Little Yuan won't be able to see father, mother, big brother and big sister in the future. Sob sob. Little Yuan grabbed his arm and cried. Let go of me. Xianxia said with a sinister expression. He didn't want to go to such a mysterious place that he didn't know anything about even if he was beaten to death. No. Little Yuan tightened his grip and shook his head stubbornly. Xianxia immediately laughed coldly. Now that things had come to this, how could he still be soft-hearted? Pa. He chopped at the back of little Yuan's neck with his palm, only to discover that a strange force had rebounded from the child's body, causing his palm to go numb. Little Yuan couldn't cry anymore. He looked at him in a daze, not knowing what to do. Xianxia was also dumbfounded. He looked at little Yuan again and realized that he couldn't see through little Yuan's cultivation. The corner of his mouth twitched. He suddenly took out a hell-steel melon hammer and mercilessly smashed it at the back of little Yuan's neck. Little Yuan's teary eyes were filled with disbelief. He couldn't believe that his respectable and adorable brother Yu would actually do such a thing to him. He could only watch helplessly as he fainted in his seat. The people below couldn't see this scene, but some of the experts hidden in the air saw it clearly. They all gritted their teeth. The scholar and the silver armor army also looked at each other speechlessly. Then they saw Xianxia put away the hell-steel melon hammer in his hand. He flipped over and directly flew out of the carriage. He turned into a ray of light and shot towards the river Styx below. Everyone looked at Xianxia, who had returned to Grey Cloud Xian's side. They all looked at him as if they were looking at a monster. Songyun Xian gulped as a look of disappointment flashed across his eyes. He never thought that he would return. There was a rumbling sound in the sky. Everyone stared at the sky and saw a strong light flash. Then the carriage was swallowed by the purple halo. Immediately after, the spinning purple halo suddenly stopped spinning, and once again condensed into a dozen or so purple lightning bolts. It was as if a huge hand had grabbed a bunch of long threads and fiercely pulled them to the same point in the night sky. The night sky was pitch black and calm. Only the sound of the netherworld river could be heard. In an instant, everything returned to normal as if nothing had happened. The people in all directions didn't move. They were still in their original positions, reflecting on everything that had just happened. That Pegasus carriage that tore through the sky was enough for everyone to analyze for a while. As for Xianxia, he felt that he had been the most wronged. He felt that he had been dragged into this matter for no reason at all. Putting aside the fact that there were no benefits, he had even hit someone else's son. Perhaps that person would bear a grudge against him, so he cautiously and vigilantly guarded against all members of the Li Palace's water tribe. Li Guang's face was filled with excitement while the Empress sorrowfully stared in the direction her son had disappeared. The crown princes and princesses all had complicated expressions. Whether it was them or the various powerhouses, none of them could have imagined that the person who had succeeded in leaping through the Dragon Gate would be Li Guang's youngest son, who had not even reached the level of an underworld knight. It truly could be said that karma had long since been decided, and it was beyond anyone's control. Why was it like this? The crowd couldn't help but recall what Xianxia had said before. He had said that he had seen the fourth prince of the Li Palace glowing with a multicolored light, as if he had been possessed by a dragon. Previously, everyone had believed that Xianxia was talking nonsense, but everyone had seen the strange phenomenon that had occurred when the fourth prince of the Li Palace had leaped through the Dragon Gate. If Xianxia was playing tricks, then his acting was a little too good. Especially that scene of him clinging to life and being afraid of death, everyone still remembered it vividly. Based on everyone's experience, they could naturally see that Xianxia had not been faking it. From this, they could infer that the fourth prince of the Li Palace was destined to leap through the Dragon Gate. And the theory that the black carp of the underworld river would form good karma with others after leaping through the Dragon Gate had once again been verified. Everyone had no choice but to believe it. In other words, Xianxia's use of a fishing rod to target the fourth prince of the Li Palace truly had been a misunderstanding. Just as he had said, he had not intended to humiliate the water tribe of the underworld river. Congratulations to the black carp tribe of the underworld river. After so many years, a person of great fortune has once again transformed into a black dragon and left the netherworld. This is truly worthy of celebration. An indifferent and unhurried voice suddenly resounded through the night sky. It was not a voice, but it echoed in every direction, causing everyone's minds to shake. Especially that tone of voice. Although it was polite words of congratulations, it gave off a feeling of being high above all living beings. The various experts on the surface of the underworld river trembled and raised their heads to look around. The experts hidden in the darkness in the sky also looked around, all of them trembling in fear. At first Xianxia did not think much of it, but after observing the changes in the expressions of Li Guang and the other experts, he was slightly alarmed. He immediately determined that this person who had yet to reveal himself was not ordinary. Li Guang looked around, then respectfully clasped his hands to the air and said, "Li Guang represents the Black Carp tribe of the Underworld River in thanking the Emperor of the Underworld. We did not know that the Emperor of the Underworld would grace us with his presence and did not lead the entire tribe to welcome you. This is truly a sin. Dare I ask, what advice does the Emperor of the Underworld have?" The Emperor of the Underworld? Xianxia was shocked. He did not think that Li Guang would dare address the other party as the Emperor of the Underworld when he did not know who the other party was. He did not expect it to be the Emperor of the Underworld who had severely wounded his teacher in 3 moves, the legendary Supreme Master of the Underworld, the Emperor of the Underworld who had come in person. Oh my. In his shock he quickly glanced around, but he could not detect where the target was. He immediately looked at Xianxia and found that Xianxia also had a shocked expression. It was obvious that he did not expect the Emperor of the Underworld to come in person. "It's not advice, but I should congratulate you. Farewell." As soon as the indifferent voice fell, 2 white flowing lights appeared in a dark corner in the sky, disappearing quickly into the horizon. At the same time that the 2 white lights appeared, all the people bowed in the direction of the departing figures with cupped hands, saying, "Farewell, Underworld Emperor." Xianxia and Xianxia also followed suit, bowing respectfully to bid farewell. After everyone stood up, congratulatory voices continuously came from all directions towards Li Guang. Li Guang, on the other hand, continuously cupped his fists towards all directions in return. The surrounding water tribe experts all hid into the underworld river and left. Streaks of light also flew past in the sky. In a short while almost everyone had left, leaving only the people of Li Palace and the people of Hidden Dragon Villa in the distant sky. "Let's go as well," Xianxia secretly whispered to Xianxia and Xinyu. The 3 of them had the same idea. They all felt that this was not a place to stay for long, and that it was better to leave as soon as possible. "Wait!" Li Guang shouted, and the 3 of them paused. What they were worried about had happened, and they slowly turned around to look at him. Xianxia frowned and said, "Old man Li Guang, no matter what, I played a part in Xiaoyuan's transformation into a dragon. Do you still want to hold on to other things and not let go?" "What did you play a part in?" Crown Prince Li Zhong snorted coldly and said, "You said it before, my 4th brother's body had a faint glow as if he was possessed by a dragon. This means that my 4th brother is destined to leap over the dragon gate. Unless what you said before was a lie, and you used a fishing rod to insult the water race of the underworld river." Even without him saying it, Xianxia himself felt a little puzzled. Saying that there was a strange phenomenon on Xiaoyuan's body was originally nonsense. When he carried Xiaoyuan to leap over the dragon gate, he realized that there was no resistance and thought that it would be ineffective. Who knew that Xiaoyuan would succeed so easily and successfully transform into a dragon? What a joke. He still could not figure out what was going on. Could it be that the legend of forming good karma was true, and that he was the fated person in the legend? But it seemed a little ridiculous. Even so, it did not mean that he could let this so-called crown prince shout at him. He immediately narrowed his eyes and laughed coldly. "Ungrateful and sharp-tongued. I told you long ago that you have no right to speak in front of me." The high temperature of the purple flames hidden within his body suddenly erupted in an earth-shattering manner, instantly enveloping the surface of the netherworld river. The power of the powerful purple flames was not child's play, not to mention that the high temperature was focused on Crown Prince Li Zhong. In that instant, Crown Prince Li Zhong felt as if he had fallen into an endless purgatory. His body was burning both inside and out, and he felt like he was about to be burned to ashes. Immediately, a transparent black protective aura surged out, intending to block the corrosion of the high temperature. When Yu Qianqiu subdued Xinyu, he had already understood that the extreme yang flames in his body could restrain the cultivators of the underworld. Thinking back to when he was in the human world, he had forced out the remaining power of the black fire many times without revealing it to fight against enemies. Along the way, he had been wondering if he could use the same method to test out the blue fire and purple fire in the netherworld. He did not want to test this move on Li Zhong, but this guy was too tactless. He had no grudges with him, but he had repeatedly contradicted him. You have the support of your parents who are mid-stage underworld emperors, and I also have a golden fighter who is a mid-stage immortal emperor, as well as the decree of the immortal world immortal emperor. Why should I be afraid of you? At that moment it was not just Prince Li Zhong who felt it. All of the black carps of the Styx River felt the power that made their hearts palpitate. It was a kind of fate where the sunlight dispelled the haze. All of the water races felt a sense of fear that came from the depths of their souls. They all looked at Yu Qianqiu in fear. Li Guang and his wife stared at Yu Qianqiu in disbelief. Was this the power of a minor immortal cultivator? Had he been hiding his cultivation all this time? Xinyu was also trembling. He felt something from Yu Qianqiu that made his heart tremble. Songyun Exen suddenly stared at Yu Qianqiu, a shocked expression on his face. Use it well and you will be invincible. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes as he stared at Li Zhong's black protective aura. He suddenly recalled what his master Bai Chongqun had said. With a thought, the purple flames that were in a stalemate with Li Zhong's protective aura instantly condensed into an invisible high-energy blade. Chapter 10-12. I wonder how powerful this blade is. Yu Qianqiu thought as he stared coldly at Li Zhong. Everyone around him suddenly felt that the terrifying power had disappeared, and they couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Li Zhong, who was hiding in the transparent black protective aura, also let out a sigh of relief. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with sparkling eyes. The terrifying power just now made him feel a lingering fear, and he no longer had the confidence to fight against Yu Qianqiu. Just as he was thinking about how to get himself out of the situation, a swoosh sound rang out. A hole suddenly appeared on the black protective aura, as effortlessly as cutting a piece of paper. In an instant, a long hole was cut open by something unknown. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth suddenly curved into a cold smile. Sure enough, it was just as he had expected. Ah! Li Zhong screamed, and he was almost scared out of his wits. The protective aura was easily broken, and he didn't even notice how the opponent made the move just now. He desperately urged the protective aura to quickly fuse together. Not to mention him, Li Guang, his wife, and the people of the water race as well as Songyun Exen were all shocked. Yu Qianqiu sneered and stretched out his palm towards Li Zhong. His 5 fingers spread out like a claw, and the invisible blade suddenly spun like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. The sound of swoosh swoosh was endless, and in an instant, Li Zhong's protective aura was cut into pieces, like a broken eggshell, and immediately collapsed. The invisible blade caused such a big movement, anyone would notice its existence. Li Zhong, who was panic-stricken and at a loss, was about to deal with it, but he saw Yu Qianqiu seize the opportunity. His 5 fingers were like claws and he shouted sternly, absorbing Star's great magic. White smoke suddenly erupted from Li Zhong's body. Before the white smoke could disperse, a withered corpse immediately rushed out of the white smoke. With a hoarse and dry voice he shouted, "Father, save me." The speed at which he was escaping was worlds apart from his previous speed. Almost at the same time, the invisible blade had already chased after Li Zhong to kill him. Li Guang was shocked. He had wanted to let his son test out Yu Qianqiu's strength, but he didn't expect that his son didn't even have the time to fight back and was already too late to escape. How could he not be shocked? However, with Li Guang's level of cultivation, the invisible blade had caused quite a commotion. There was nowhere for him to hide. How could he let his son be killed? He teleported and blocked Li Zhong's back. His black imperial robe fluttered even though there was no wind. He did not move at all, but a pillar of water shot out from the netherworld river like a cannonball. There was a loud bang. Li Guang's attack was no small matter. The invisible blade was instantly hit by the water pillar and could no longer condense into a blade. With Yu Qianqiu's cultivation he could no longer control it. In an instant, the intense heat spread in all directions, and the water pillar that shot into the sky was almost completely turned into mist by the high temperature. The mist quickly dispersed and the entire water region seemed to be in a high-temperature steamer. As soon as the shockwave from the collision spread out, Songyun Exin, who had seen Li Guang make a move, immediately appeared in front of Yu Qianqiu. With a cold expression, he reached his right hand into his left sleeve and touched the storage bracelet on his wrist. There were 10 spaces in the storage bracelet and one of them contained 5 swords. Any one of them could be earth-shattering. Li Guang waved his sleeve, and the mist in front of him was immediately dispersed. He immediately saw Grey Cloud Xian's action and his pupils shrank. He immediately shouted, "We have no enmity with each other, so why must we fight to the death?" Seeing that the other party was not going to fight, Grey Cloud Xian's hand, which was already making a sword-drawing gesture on the storage bracelet, paused. Yu Qianqiu slowly walked out from behind him. He looked at Li Guang and said in a low voice, "Everyone has seen and heard it with their eyes and ears. It's not that we want to fight to the death with you, but that son of yours has repeatedly spoken rudely and has gone too far. It's simply intolerable." "Zhong, how are you?" The Empress, who was supporting Crown Prince Li Zhong, cried out in pain. Everyone looked over and saw that Crown Prince Li Zhong's face was contorted. His entire body had become skin and bones and he was no different from a dried corpse. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with fear in his eyes, and a hoarse voice came from his shriveled throat. "Mother, move aside. I want to draw water. I'm about to die." The Empress retreated hesitantly. Crown Prince Li Zhong brazenly fell back onto the surface of the river Styx. He floated up and down in the water and countless tiny bubbles appeared all over his body. It was as if he had opened up all his pores and was drinking water. His withered body, which was like a dried corpse, gradually began to fill up. When he returned to normal, he directly stood on the surface of the water with a splash. He stood beside his mother with a gloomy expression, gritting his teeth and not making a sound. Grey Cloud Xian glanced at Yu Qianqiu. He did not know what evil method he had used to injure someone to such a frightening degree. Yu Qianqiu had a faint smile on his face as he stared at Li Zhong. To him, that attack just now could not be said to be a small harvest. Ever since he had failed to use the Absorbing Star's great art for the first time in the celestial world, he did not dare to use it recklessly. He was afraid that at a critical moment he would go for wool and come home shorn. Now that he was using the 2 arts of fire and water together, he could use the power of the purple flames to condense an invisible high-energy blade that specialized in shattering the opponent's protective stellar chi. Then he could use the Absorbing Star's great art of the water arts to complement each other. Just the thought of its might made him excited. It did not matter if the opponent had forged an immortal body, a nether body or a demonic body. As long as they were hit by his Absorbing Star's great art, no matter how powerful their cultivation was, they would not be able to display even 1/10 of their usual strength. At this moment, the invisible and formless high-energy blade had become a formidable killing move that could easily take the opponent's life. What's more, he could completely condense a few more high-energy blades made of purple flames. Using the Guiyuan sword technique to control them, the power would not be something a normal expert could withstand. Seeing that his son was safe and sound, Li Guang let out a sigh of relief. He first glanced at the ever-vigilant Grey Cloud Xian, then stared at Yu Qianqiu and slowly said, "My son was reckless, but he has also been punished. From now on we will go our separate ways and our grudges will be resolved." "How is that?" "I never wanted to have any entanglements with your Li Palace's water tribe," Yu Qianqiu indifferently said. These words undoubtedly approved of the other party's solution. The reason why he was so happy was because he did not know that Xiao Yuan's transformation into a dragon was due to his help. Otherwise, with his personality, how could he be so kind? Even if he did not scrape a sum of money from the Li Palace, he would still make the Li Palace owe him an enormous debt of gratitude. At the same time, because of his previous nonsense of all the things he could say, he had to say that Xiao Yuan's body was like a roaming dragon, creating a coincidence. Originally, Li Guang still wanted to remember his great favor, but after thinking about it, he felt that it was because of Xiao Yuan himself. Yu Qianqiu did not do anything, so the matter was left unsettled. But then again, if it was not for his nonsense, of course, the scholar who was hiding in the air at that time would not have let him go so easily. He would definitely have captured him and brought him back to be studied. Thus, everything had 2 sides and no one could say whether it was a blessing or a curse. Li Guang's face was expressionless. He glanced at Songyun Exin, then flashed to the throne of the one-horned water rhinoceros and shouted, "Return to the palace." With these words there were 2 cracks of a whip. The Li Palace's water tribe slowly sank into the river Styx, leaving from the bottom of the water. At this time only Yu Qianqiu, Songyun Exin, and Xin Yu remained on the surface of the river Styx. The 3 of them had come together, but after the storm only the 3 of them remained. The people of the distant hidden dragon villa all flew over. 100 people floated in the air, looking at the 3 of them in bewilderment. They had faintly seen Yu Qianqiu help the Li Palace's water tribe successfully transform into a dragon, and then saw Yu Qianqiu turn hostile and attack the Li Palace's water tribe. They could not hear what was being said, so they were confused and could not understand what was going on. "Dare I ask, Sect Master Yu, what happened just now?" Ding Xiang cupped his hands in the air and asked, his tone clearly even more infuriating. "Faster, thief. You guys hid far away early in the morning. No matter what happened, I can't count on you guys to help." Yu Qianqiu was a little unhappy and casually said, "It's already over, it's just a small matter, not worth mentioning." Seeing that he didn't want to say it, Ding Xiang couldn't force him. He looked at the dark road ahead and said with a smile, "I don't know if Great Master Tsong and Sect Leader you are going to Twilight City. So we might as well travel together. At least we can take care of each other." He had made up his mind to find a way to get information from Yu Qianqiu. The Pegasus carriage piercing through the sky and the Styx black carp leaping through the dragon gate and transforming into a dragon, such important matters. If he could get this information back to the sect, it would definitely be a great merit. So he had to find a way to rely on the 2 of them. As long as they were together, there was a chance of getting information, otherwise there would be no chance. How could Songyun Exin and Yu Qianqiu not see such an obvious thing? However, Hidden Dragon Villa was a big sect in the Immortal world after all. Songyun Exin could look down on them, but Yu Qianqiu's World Chamber of Commerce still needed to survive in the Immortal world, so there was no need to make another strong enemy. Moreover, it was not a bad thing to have more people who were familiar with the situation. He laughed heartily and said, "Elder Ding is right. If we travel together we can look out for each other." Then he looked at Jiu Yu and said, "Let's continue our journey." Jiu Yu still had a lingering fear about what had just happened, so he did not dare to say much. He immediately sank into the water and revealed his original form. Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Exin landed on the big shell and rode the wind and waves again. Ding Xiang called his fellow sect members and quickly followed. Half a day had passed and Yu Qianqiu faced the cool wind on the Styx River with his hands behind his back. His eyes flickered as he looked forward and he did not say a word. This made Songyun Exin feel a little strange. This was the first time he had seen this fellow open his eyes and speak so honestly. It was truly rare. Little did he know that after Yu Qianqiu understood how to use the purple flame high-energy saber, he began to doubt his previous actions. He had lived 2 lives and his previous life's experience told him that he had to develop a large force that could ensure his safety. It would be best if everything was under his control, so that he could avoid ending up miserably like in his previous life. However, all this while he seemed to have neglected one thing, and that was that the world he was in now was not the mortal world of his previous life. In the mortal world, a single person's power was always insignificant, and the foundation to display great power was always a group. In the end, he brought this obsession to this world and spared no effort to develop his own force. However, this world was completely different from his previous life. Demons and ghosts flew in the sky and burrowed into the ground. Even immortals were constantly acting as bystanders. This was completely out of the scope of the mortal world. At the end of the day, the foundation of everything was that his own cultivation had to be strong enough. This was a world where individual ability was ranked before the strength of a group, and he was neglecting the essentials. His understanding of the purple flame high-energy saber made him understand that it was not enough to cultivate just by sitting cross-legged and imagining things. More actual combat often gave more benefits than just thinking. Just like the old man Bai Chongqun had said, if you used it well you would be invincible. If you did not use it well, how could you use it well? For example, the old man would look for experts to fight when he had nothing to do, and when he lost he would hide and cultivate. When his abilities improved he would come out to look for others to fight. His ability grew by leaps and bounds, to the point where he dared to take the initiative to fight the Emperor of the Underworld. Although it was unknown whether the old man was dead or alive, if he came out again, who in the Immortal and Netherworld would dare to provoke him, except for the top experts? This was the result of fighting. From this, Yu Qianqiu came to a conclusion. It wasn't a long-term solution for him to always hide and pretend to be a grandson. It was good to exercise more. If he used it well, he would be invincible in the world. Chapter 10:13. A group of more than 100 people traveled upstream along the river Styx. They traveled for 5 days and traveled more than 10 million miles. For everyone except for Xinyu, this was the first time they saw the various strange landforms on both sides of the river Styx. Apart from encountering some strong winds and waves along the way, they were safe. Occasionally, some water clan would block the road and question why they trespassed. After learning that it was Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Exin, they did not make things difficult for them and let them pass. This scene made Ding Tong and the others from the Hidden Dragon Mountain Villa, who were following the two nervously, secretly surprised. They didn't expect Grey Cloud Xian's face to be so big that he was so popular among the Styx's water race. They were naturally sure that it was because of Songyun Xian because he was the one with the highest cultivation here. In fact, this was indeed the case. The news that Songyun Xian had mastered the 3 swords in one sword drawing technique that only the sect master of Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, knew had already spread in the netherworld. Back then, the sect master of Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, used the sword drawing technique to dominate the netherworld continent. He was famous among the Water Clan. Therefore, after learning that Songyun Exin was traveling upstream along the river Styx, the Water Clan sent down orders to their subordinates not to provoke Songyun Exin to avoid unnecessary trouble. This showed how powerful Wang Qing was back then. Along the way, Ding Xiang of the Hidden Dragon Mountain Manor was also very thick-skinned. Every time he was questioned by the Underworld River's water tribe, he would bluntly say that he was with Grey Cloud Exin and Yu Qianqiu. Other than looking at him with disdain, Songyun Exin did not say much. He intentionally let the people of the Hidden Dragon Villa know his power. Speaking of which, he was actually a little proud. In the beginning, he was quite wary of the Water Clan. Now that he saw that the Water Clan did not dare to challenge him, he could not help but be full of confidence. When faced with questions from the Water Clan, he always coldly spat out the 3 words, Songyun Exin, with the demeanor of an expert. This made Yu Qianqiu despise him. When he saw Songyun Exin's calm demeanor, he could not help but recall the vigilance on his face when he first mentioned the Water Clan. At that time, Songyun Exin was not as daring as Yu Qianqiu, but now he was showing off his power. However, this was also good. It would reduce unnecessary trouble. This time, after passing through the inspection of the Nether River's water tribe in a region of water, Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned his head to look at Ding Xiang, who was flying at a low altitude, and said with a smile, "Elder Ding, since we are all in the same group, why don't you come down and have a chat?" He pointed at the shells under his feet that were breaking through the waves. There was still space and about 5 or 6 people could stand there. Songyun Exin looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. Ding Xiang, who was flying at a low altitude, was also stunned, and then he was happy. He was looking for an opportunity to ask along the way, but Songyun Exin had always been indifferent, and Yu Qianqiu looked like he had a lot of thoughts in his mind. He had never found a suitable opportunity to interject, but now it came to him. He immediately cupped his hands and laughed. "Since sect leader Yu has invited me with great hospitality, how would Prime Minister Ding dare to refuse?" In a flash, he landed behind Yu Qianqiu and also cupped his hands at Songyun Exin. Yu Qianqiu turned around, looked Ding Xiang up and down, and said with a smile, "I suddenly thought of something just now. May I know why your sect is called Hidden Dragon Villa? Is there really a hidden dragon in your sect?" Ding Xiang was stunned, and then he waved his hands and said with a smile, "It's just a symbolic meaning of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. How can there really be a hidden dragon?" However, the process of sect leader Yu helping the Nether River Black Carp clan to successfully leap through the Dragon's Gate and become a dragon can be said to be legendary. Because we are too far away, we are not clear about the twists and turns. May I know why sect leader Yu fought with the Nether River Black Carp clan later? Yu Qianqiu chuckled and was about to say a few perfunctory words, but he felt Xinyu slowly slowed down again. At the same time, he saw the smile on Ding Xiang's face freeze, and Songyun Xian's expression also froze. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but turn his head and see a stretch of white mountain range in front of him. It seemed a little abnormal in this dark netherworld. At this moment, Xinyu, who was at his feet, also stopped. "Is there something in front?" Yu Qianqiu turned to look ahead and asked with a frown. As he spoke, he faintly felt a cold air blowing on his face. The hidden dragon villa disciples in the air also stopped in the air with a solemn expression. It's the Great Snow Mountain, Xianxia said in a deep voice. Ding Xiang nodded slightly with a dignified expression. Yes. When people from the immortal world go to Twilight City, they always avoid this flight route in order to bypass this Great Snow Mountain. It seems that we can't go straight up the Nether River, we have to take a detour. Yu Qianqiu was dazed. Doesn't that mean we have to take a lot of detours? Xianxia glanced at him. This Nether River is full of twists and turns. After a few days, we don't know how many detours we have taken. Do you still care about this little detour? Yu Qianqiu didn't argue with him. Figuring out what was going on was the right thing to do. He asked suspiciously, is there something scary about this Great Snow Mountain? Ding Xiang shook his head. I don't know. Anyway, no one from the immortal world who entered this Great Snow Mountain came out alive. Until now we don't know why. Yu Qianqiu looked at Grey Cloud Exen, but Grey Cloud Exen was also shaking his head to indicate that he didn't know. Yu Qianqiu stomped his feet and said, Xin Yu, do you know what's going on? I know a little. Xin Yu, who was below, said slowly, I heard from the seniors in the Nether River's water tribe that there are 2 mid-stage underworld emperor experts living in this Great Snow Mountain. They are a man and a woman, called the Underworld Snow Emperor and the Underworld Snow Empress respectively. It is said that they have a daughter who was injured by a person from the immortal world a long time ago. Until now, her injury has not healed and she has been relying on some secret technique to extend her life. Therefore, the husband and wife hate the people from the immortal world. Once someone from the immortal world intrudes into their territory, the husband and wife have always killed without mercy. The 3 of them looked at each other. So that was the case. They had learned something new. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows, looked at the white undulating mountains in the distance and said, so we have to make a detour? I have a space in my body that can hide 2 or 3 people. Then we can quietly cross this distance under the Nether River. It shouldn't be a problem, Xin Yu said. The 3 of them couldn't help but look up at the hundreds of hidden Dragon Villa disciples floating in the air, and then at the size of the clam under their feet. It was obvious that Xin Yu was not lying. There was no way to hide everyone. Yu Qianqiu had a troubled look on his face. He spread his hands and said to Ding Xiang, Elder Ding, there is no other way. The truth is in front of us. Xin Yu can only hide 3 people at most. I'm afraid you have to make a detour. Ding Xiang chuckled and looked up at the people in the air. Take a detour to Twilight City. Don't worry about me. I will accompany Master Song Yun and Sect Master Yu. Yu Qianqiu and Song Yun Exen looked at each other speechlessly. They thought that this guy was really responsible for gathering information. The group of hidden Dragon Villa disciples accepted the order respectfully. Ding Xiang gave them a few more instructions and asked them to be careful. Then the 3 of them watched the group of people turn into streams of light and make a detour. Then under Xin Yu's guidance the 3 of them floated in the air. Xin Yu's clam, which was more than 10 meters long, floated to the surface of the river. Half of the huge clam shell slowly opened up a big opening that was just big enough for a person to enter. As soon as the opening opened, a gorgeous white light bloomed inside. It was very conspicuous on the dark Netherworld river. The 3 of them looked at each other. Yu Qianqiu was the first to go in and shouted, Come in quickly. Song Yun Exan and Ding Xiang saw that there was nothing wrong, so they followed him in. As soon as the 3 of them entered, they immediately understood the reason for the light. They saw 12 fist-sized white luminous pearls wrapped in the flesh membrane above their heads, illuminating the insides of the clam. It was rare to see 12 luminous pearls of such size. The opened mouth of the clam quickly closed, completely isolating the darkness outside. It slowly sank to the bottom of the Netherworld River and moved quickly. Just as Xin Yu dived into the water, the surface of the Netherworld River not far away quietly stirred, and a black shadow dived into the water. Once Xin Yu reached the bottom of the water, he moved faster. Most of the space inside his body was occupied by his physical body. In the limited space, Song Yun Xian and Ding Xiang had already sat down cross-legged. Yu Qianqiu stood there and looked around. He looked at the slightly red clam flesh, which looked like a genuine leather sofa. What attracted him the most were the 12 luminous pearls that were distributed in a crescent shape. After looking for a while, he said thoughtfully, They should be pearls. We have entered the Great Snow Mountain in the Netherworld River Basin. Please don't make any noise. If you have anything to say, wait until we pass through the Great Snow Mountain. Otherwise, we will be discovered by the powerhouses on the Great Snow Mountain and cause unnecessary trouble. Xinyu warned with good intentions. Yu Qianqiu immediately shut up and sat down cross-legged. The space was limited, so he could only face Zhou Xian and Ding Xiang. The space was silent. About 2 to 4 hours later, there was a bang as if they had been hit by something. The space shook violently and the three of them opened their eyes at the same time. Yu Qianqiu said sternly, "Xinyu, what are you trying to do?" The three of them realized that they had fallen into a trap at the same time. Instantly their gazes darkened, but at this moment, they could feel that they were moving faster in the water. Suddenly they heard Zhou say in fear, "I have been wronged. It's not what I want to do, but someone is attacking me." The three of them looked at each other. Zhou Xian snorted coldly and said, "Let me out. I want to see who the expert is." Having confidence was different. Bang! The space shook violently again. Zhou exclaimed, "It's the crown prince of the Li Palace, Li Zhong. My speed in the water is not as fast as him. He wants to force us out of the Netherworld River. Oh no, we have already entered the hinterland of the Great Snow Mountain in the Netherworld River Basin. He must have calculated this." The expressions of the three of them changed. Purposely attacking in the hinterland of the Great Snow Mountain, it was obvious that he had been planning this for a long time. His motive was obvious. He wanted to force the three of them out and then use the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress to kill them. Li Zhong. Yu Qianqiu suddenly stood up and said with a ferocious expression, "Bastard. How dare he play dirty with me? Zhou, open the door, let me go out and kill him." Chapter 10:14. As he spoke there were a few more bangs. Yu Qianqiu, who had just stood up, staggered and leaned against Xinyu's body. Xinyu smiled bitterly. "If you go out now, you'll be easily discovered by the people from the Great Snow Mountain. I'll think of another way to get rid of him." Xinyu was being so responsible because he had no other choice. After all, Yu Qianqiu had placed a seal in his body that had yet to be undone. He didn't care about what happened to the other two, but he couldn't let anything happen to Yu Qianqiu. Something happened to this guy, he would die with him, so he had no choice but to be responsible. Think of another way. Yu Qianqiu, who was leaning against Xinyu's body, had a dark expression. He roared, "Open the door for me. Killing him is the best way. If you don't open the door, I'll dig a hole to get out." Fine. Xinyu was helpless. As he moved quickly, the clamshell quickly cracked open a human-sized hole. Strangely, the water outside was blocked. "Don't give him a chance to escape." Yu Qianqiu threw a sentence at the other two and disappeared. Almost at the same time that Yu Qianqiu left, Zhou Xian and Ding Xiang also left with gloomy expressions. No one would be happy to be tricked like this. As soon as Yu Qianqiu emerged from the cold, pitch-black underworld river water, he immediately saw a 20-meter-long underworld river black carp leaping up. Needless to say, this was undoubtedly the crown prince of the Li Palace, Li Zhong. Li Zhong saw the clamshell open and immediately knew that someone was coming out. Without hesitation, he quickly changed directions and leaped out of the Styx River. He turned into a human and teleported several times, disappearing into the depths of the snowy mountain ahead. His speed in the water was unbelievably fast. This was probably the main reason why he dared to provoke him. Yu Qianqiu's speed in the water was quite fast, but the other party still had the upper hand. When he emerged from the surface of the Styx River, he could no longer see the figure of Li Zhong. Immediately after that, Zhou Xian and Ding Xiang rushed out one after another. The two of them looked at Yu Qianqiu with some surprise in their eyes. They had seen the speed at which Yu Qianqiu broke through the water, but they did not expect him to be able to swim so fast in the water. They could not figure out his depth. Little did they know that Yu Qianqiu had cultivated the water incantation, and his speed in the water was no slower than a fish. After the two of them looked around, Yu Qianqiu asked in a deep voice, "Where did he go?" Yu Qianqiu looked around with a gloomy face and said, "I don't know. But the reason he came ashore was to lure us out so that the master of this place could find us. But I don't think he's gone far. He should know that after leaving the water, it's very difficult to escape from an expert like you with his speed. He's probably hiding somewhere." The two of them nodded in unison and agreed with his analysis. Zhou Xian looked around and said in a deep voice, "This is the Netherworld and we are not as familiar with it as he is. With such a treacherous person laying a trap behind our backs, he will be a disaster sooner or later. Let's split up and look for him. We must get rid of him. At this moment, Xinyu also transformed into his human form and flew in front of them. He smiled bitterly and said, "We should take this opportunity to leave from the bottom of the Netherworld River. Otherwise, when the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress find out, you won't be able to leave even if you want to." Xianxia did not agree with these words. Although he did not want to cause trouble, he was very confident in his own strength. He was not afraid of the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress. On the other hand, Ding Xiang was a little hesitant, as if he did not want to lose his life because of the grudges between others. Go where?" Yu Qianzhou glared at Jiuyu, then looked around and said, "He clearly wants to put us to death. Do you believe that he will continue to cause trouble as soon as we step into the water, until the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress discover us?" As soon as these words came out, Xianxia and Ding Xiang's eyes lit up, and Yu Qianzhou himself was slightly startled. The three of them exchanged glances and a common plan appeared in their minds, and that was to pretend to leave, lure Li Zhong out and kill him. However, before the plan could be implemented, their ears twitched and they looked up into the sky. Countless gray shadows floated down from the sky. When the gray shadows got closer, they realized that it was white. It was actually snowing. It was snowing so heavily. They landed quietly in the flowing Netherworld River and landed on the mountains and plains on both sides of the Netherworld River. They could hear faint rustling sounds. "Why is it suddenly snowing?" Yu Qianzhou was stunned. Xinyu looked around and said, "Could it be that the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress have discovered us?" His words caused the other three to become alert. Xianxia couldn't help but snort. "If that's the case, there's no need to play any tricks. Let's split up and search. That guy must be hiding nearby. He might be watching us. Let's find him and kill him first. Then we can deal with the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress." After saying this, he released his divine sense to search the surroundings. He had already flown out. Indeed, the skilled were bold. Yu Qianzhou was speechless. This old thing was a little too confident. They hadn't even ascertained whether the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress had discovered them. Why did he have to use a stupid method instead of a good one? However, it was already like this. He could only sigh and say to Xinyu, "Elder Ding and I will search on the other side. You stay here and don't let Li Zhong have the chance to escape into the river." This. Xinyu hesitated and smiled bitterly. "How would I dare to attack the Crown Prince of Li Palace? Why don't I set up a mirage mist formation on this section of the river? If he really wants to escape into the river Styx, he should be trapped by my mirage mist formation for a while. As for what to do, you guys solve it yourselves." "Damn it. What's the difference between this and fighting?" Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes. "Do whatever you want. Just don't let him escape into the river Styx. Otherwise, I'll hold you accountable." He then flew to the other side of the river and released his divine sense to search bit by bit. Ding Xiang helplessly followed. He and Yu Qianzhou split up to search. In fact, he didn't want to become enemies with Li Palace. He regretted following them. However, he was already in the hinterland of Snowy Mountain. If he didn't work together with these two, he might be abandoned by them. He wasn't confident that he could leave this vast snowy mountain alone. Xinyu, who was floating on the river, quickly released a rolling gray fog that surged to both sides of the river Styx. However, since Li Zhong dared to come alone to provoke them, he must have something to rely on. Otherwise, no one would joke around with their lives. The gray mirage mist sealed off the surface of the river and snow sprinkled down on both sides of the river Styx. The three of them searched a radius of several thousand meters but found no trace of Li Zhong. Li Zhong probably couldn't hide too far away. The three of them had no choice but to resentfully meet up in the sky above the river Styx. Now that things had come to this, the three of them had no other choice. However, they were 90% certain that Li Zhong was hiding somewhere nearby. They just didn't know what method he had used to evade detection from right under their noses. They had spent so much effort in vain. Left with no choice, the three of them secretly communicated and discussed for a while. In the end, they decided to use the previous method and pretend to leave to lure that guy out. Just as Xinyu retracted the gray fog and was about to return to his original form, a crisp jingle suddenly came from the distance. The three of them were startled and turned their heads to look through the drifting snow. Behind the snowy peak in front of them, the crisp ringing of bells could be heard. Not long after, a graceful girl wearing a white fur dress appeared from behind the snowy peak and landed lightly on the snowy peak. She also wore a furry fur hat on her head, and her black hair fluttered in the wind under the hat. She seemed to be looking for something as she strolled on the snowy peak. A pure white jade bell the size of half a thumb hung from her waist belt. As she walked, it emitted crisp and melodious tinkling sounds. The girl walked to the ice cliff on the side of the snowy peak and stopped. She seemed to have discovered something and bent down to pluck something from an ice cave. It was a pure white flower that looked like a snow lotus. She put it in front of her nose and smelled it. Then she put it into her storage bracelet with a smile. A gust of wind blew, carrying snow and ice into the neck of her white scarf. The girl raised her head to look at the falling snow in the dark night sky, letting the falling snow hit her face. She even stuck out her bright red tongue to lick the snowflakes that fell on her lips. Then she opened her arms and spun on the snowy peak. Her long white fur dress fluttered like a butterfly, and the jade bell on her waist kept jingling. Heavy snow swirled in the air. On the lonely night, on the lonely snowy peak, a lonely young girl was dancing alone. The rustling sound of the wind and snow mixed with the jingling of the jade bell gave people a poignant but beautiful feeling. Xianxia and the others who were in the sky above the Netherworld River were stunned. They felt that this girl was like an ice fairy that had descended from the sky. There was not a trace of smoke or fire on her body. Her otherworldly beauty was so shocking that it made people's hearts beat faster. After the girl spun a few rounds, she suddenly froze on the spot. She stared blankly at the people in the sky above the Netherworld River. It seemed that she had just realized that someone was spying on her. She put down her arms in a daze, and the jingle of the bell also disappeared. A trace of embarrassment flashed across the girl's face. It seemed that she was embarrassed that someone had seen her unrestrained behavior. After she calmed her emotions, she stretched out an arm and flew over through the wind and snow. She landed on the snow-covered bank of the Netherworld River and looked at the people in the sky. At first, the few of them were a little wary when they saw her flying over. When they realized that she only had the cultivation of a beginner-stage underworld venerable, they secretly made an exception and immediately felt relieved. They exchanged glances and landed in front of the young lady. Now that they were face to face, they could finally see her appearance clearly. That otherworldly beauty had increased, but she seemed a little thin and weak. Especially her smooth and bright cheeks that were suffused with a sickly redness, it gave people a feeling that she was weak and sickly. In the vast snowy mountain in the Netherworld, there was no trace of snow, and it was covered in silver. There were only a few people in mixed clothes standing on the snow-covered bank of the Netherworld River. Just as they were guessing the girl's identity, the girl who seemed to have walked out of a dream blinked her long eyelashes and glanced at them. She frowned slightly and said in a calm tone, "Why do people from the immortal world dare to come here? You should leave quickly. If you are late, you won't be able to leave even if you want to." Chapter 10:15. It was obvious that she did not have a good impression of the people of the immortal realm, but she still gave them a warning. It was obvious that she was not a bad person. Ding Xiang cupped his hands and smiled. "May I know who you are and why you are alone in this world of ice and snow?" In fact, he had already guessed that this girl was from the Great Snow Mountain, and from her temperament she did not look like an ordinary person. He was so kind and polite because he wanted to have a way out in case of an emergency. "Why do you care who I am? Anyway, this is not a place for you to stay. That's all I have to say. It's up to you whether you want to leave or not." The girl's voice was very pleasant to the ears. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned and walked towards the snow mountain in front of her. Her snow-white boots left no footprints on the snow, and with every step she took, there was a clear jingle from her waist. Grey Cloud Exen looked disdainfully at the embarrassed Ding Xiang, but Xianxia's eyes rolled around. He suddenly waved his arm and shouted, "Miss, please wait." The girl slowly turned around and looked at Xianxia calmly. She said, "If you want to leave or stay, it's up to you. What else do you want to say?" Songyun Exen and Ding Xiang also looked at Xianxia in confusion. They did not know what he wanted to do. Xianxia shrugged his shoulders and walked through the thick snow to the girl. He cupped his hands and smiled bitterly. "Of course we know that it is dangerous for people from the immortal realm to stay here. However, we have a friend who had an argument with everyone just now. He was so angry that he hid nearby and refused to come out. You must know that we are friends. Although this place is dangerous, we can't abandon our friend. Miss, you should be a local. Do you have a way to help us find him? If we find him, we will take him away immediately. We will not stay here." As soon as he said this, The other three couldn't help but twitch their mouths and eyebrows. They secretly thought that this was a good idea. Their eyes fell on the girl, wondering if she had a way. The young girl looked at them in confusion. When she saw everyone looking at her with expectant eyes, she couldn't help but feel a little touched. She didn't think that these people would risk their lives for a friend. She couldn't find a reason not to help them. After a moment of hesitation, she raised a slender index finger, and the tip of her finger faintly glowed with a deep blue light. As the light became thicker and thicker, it gradually formed a soybean-sized deep blue ice soul on the tip of her finger. It was enveloped in a light blue halo and looked exceptionally beautiful. With a light flick of her finger, the azure ice soul left her fingertip, circled a few times in the air, and slowly floated towards the snowy peak that the young lady came from. The girl pointed at the floating ice soul and said to the others, "I can sense it. You guys should be able to find your friend if you follow it." Everyone's eyes lit up. Xianxia immediately transmitted his voice to Yunexin. "Old Song, that guy is a scourge if left alive. I'll leave him to you. You must kill him." But on the surface he smiled at Yunexin and said, "You go. If too many people go, I'm afraid he'll lose face." Yunexin coldly snorted, shot him a glance and then flew after the azure ice soul. The people on the shore of the underworld river watched as a blue light guided Yunexin to a hollow between two snowy peaks. The blue light of the ice soul descended there, sticking close to the surface of the snow and circling around as if saying that there was something beneath the snow. Yunexin had a face full of suspicion. He had previously inspected this place and found nothing beneath. After a pause, he once more released his spiritual sense into the layer of snow, but he still found nothing. But the person beneath the snow and ice was suffering unspeakably. Li Zhong really was hiding underneath, wrapped in a treasure of the Li Palace's water tribe. It was a white robe and its effects were about the same as the straw raincoat that Xianxia was wearing. It could hide him from spiritual sense and other senses. Who could have expected that such a woman would suddenly appear, instantly making it impossible for him to hide? This was truly terrible. After a moment of confusion, Yunexin decided to push aside the layer of snow to take a look. Unexpectedly, the moment he moved his palm, a crescent of black light shot out from beneath the snow and slashed at his chest. Grey Cloud Xian's reaction was extremely fast. At such a close distance he was actually able to quickly dodge to the side. Bang! A figure wrapped in a white cloak scuttled out from the layer of snow, continuously teleporting away with no regard for his life. "You want to run?" Yunexin angrily roared, his body explosively shooting in the direction that Li Zhong had fled in. A dazzling white light shot out from his sleeve, and with a bang a cold light as delicate as a dragon burst forth, whistling through the air and causing a rain of blood to explode. Ah! A mournful scream suddenly resounded through the air, and the two halves of a body that had been split in half were revealed, falling straight into the vast snowy ground. The people on the shore of the underworld river only saw someone escape from the layer of snow. Yunexin chased after him, but what happened next was only a scream. The entire process was blocked by the snowy peaks. Xianxia and Ding Xiang exchanged glances. They reckoned that Yunexin had already succeeded. Meanwhile, the young girl was clearly somewhat dumbfounded. Then with a ding, her figure flashed away, withdrawing the azure ice soul and swept towards the back of the snowy peaks. Xianxia and the others also quickly chased after her. Turning around the snowy peaks, they saw a 20-meter-long underworld river black carp on the snowy ground not far away. It had been split in half, with one side facing up and the other side facing down. Fresh blood dyed the surrounding snow red. It was abnormally disgusting. "It's someone from the underworld river Li Palace." After looking at the dumbfounded young girl for a while, she suddenly turned to stare at Yunexin and said angrily, "Didn't you say that he was your friend? Why did you kill him?" She felt as if she had been used. Yunexin slowly put his sword back into his storage bracelet and indifferently shook his head. "Miss, I think you're mistaken. We really are looking for a friend. But I'm very sure that the person hiding in the snow and ambushing me is definitely not the friend I'm looking for. Think about it, why would my friend ambush me? I also don't know who he is. If you don't believe me, you can ask them." She tilted her head and pointed at the people who had just arrived. "Right, we don't know this person. Yes, this person isn't the friend we're looking for." Yu Qianqiu and Ding Xiang cooperated with Song Yun Exen and gave him a perfunctory explanation. This group of crafty old fools. Whatever they said was reasonable. How could they possibly care about an inexperienced young girl? But the young girl was no fool. She could already tell that she had been tricked by them. She was so angry that she stammered. You actually used me to kill the Li Palace's water tribe. I won't let you go. Her sickly red cheeks became even redder. It was clear that she was quite angry. Miss. Song Yun Exen coldly yelled, you can't speak carelessly. With your cultivation you want to kill us? You're overestimating yourself. Saying so, he snorted at the others. Since this young girl has already misunderstood us, I don't think we need her help. We brought this on ourselves. With a flash he flew away. The others nodded and followed him over the snowy peak, flying in the direction of the underworld river. Before Yu Qianqiu left, he didn't forget to solemnly clasp his hands at the young girl. Miss, you really misunderstood us. Sigh. He shook his head helplessly and left. Big liar. The young girl screamed at Yu Qianqiu's back. It was this person who had tricked her into sympathizing with him and made her an accomplice. Flying over the snowy peak, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but turn his head to look. Why did these words sound so familiar, as if he had heard them somewhere before? Finally getting rid of the scourge Li Zhong, the few of them headed straight for the underworld river. They didn't want to stay here any longer. However, just as they landed on the underworld river, they immediately heard the cold voice of the young girl behind them. There really isn't a single good person in the immortal world. The few of them turned around and saw the young girl standing at the peak of the snowy peak. She clasped her hands together as if she was cupping water. She was cupping an azure object. Suddenly, she waved her hands and dozens of azure ice souls shot towards the bottom of the snowy peak. With a whoosh, they were buried deep in the snow. What is she doing? Is she cursing us? Ding Xiang laughed wickedly. The others were also confused. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said, ignore her. Xinyu, let's continue our journey. Yet just as he finished speaking, the few of them suddenly felt a violent tremor from the ground. They couldn't help but turn around. They saw the ground beneath the snowy peak shaking. Dozens of huge bumps appeared where the ice souls were buried. It was as if something was about to burrow out of the ground. The expressions of the few people changed. The bulging snow bumps grew taller and densely packed cracks appeared. With a bang they all burst. Dozens of huge snow-white figures rushed out. They were all kinds of animal shapes, all made from snow. There were snowmen, snow lions, snow wolves, snow leopards, snow bears. All kinds of lifelike ice sculptures that were magnified several times. What made the few of them change their expressions was that they had never seen an ice sculpture that could move. They couldn't see through their cultivation, so they didn't know if they were powerful or not. Once these monsters jumped out of the snow, they didn't stop at all. They stomped on the snow and quickly ran across the snowy plain. They roared loudly and rushed towards the few of them on the shore as if they wanted to eat them alive. Damn! What the hell is this? Yu Qianqiu stared blankly for a moment. Ding Xiang, who was standing to the side, had already shot out a ray of multicolored light. Whoosh! The flying sword drew an arc in the air and it charged into the group of charging snow monsters like a rainbow, killing them one by one. However, these snow monsters ignored their injuries and continued to run. They didn't seem to be injured at all. What made them speechless was that the snow monsters that had their stomachs pierced quickly climbed up the snow on the ground and quickly healed their wounds. Ding Xiang cut off their heads. Let's see how they can run. As soon as Grey Cloud Xan finished speaking, Ding Xiang had already used the sword control technique. The flying sword in the air once again turned into a rainbow and shot out. It flashed across the snowy ground. With a series of muffled sounds, dozens of snow monsters' heads fell on the spot. Chapter 10:16. However, the headless snow monsters were still running, and some even trampled on the heads that had just fallen off. At the same time as they ran, the snow on the ground quickly spread from their feet to their necks and reformed into new heads that kept roaring. A group of snow monsters trampled on the ground and rushed over quickly. Although there were only a few dozen of them, they ran with the momentum of tens of thousands of galloping horses. They couldn't be killed. They were stunned at the same time. Yu Qianqiu suddenly called out to Jiuyu, who was behind him. A group of beasts made of ice and snow. It's no big deal. Let Executive Song Yun and Elder Ding deal with them. Let's go to the side so that we won't affect the two experts. Jiu saw him flash to the other side of the Netherworld River and immediately followed without hesitation. Song Yun Xin looked back with contempt. Ding Xiang also wanted to retreat to the other side of the Netherworld River, but he let Yu Qianqiu take the initiative. If he continued to do this, Song Yun Xin would be the only one left here. He was afraid that he would make Song Yun Xin unhappy, so he could only shut up and accompany him. It should be known that Song Yun Xin had received the Immortal Palace's decree to protect Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu could be unscrupulous, but Ding Xiang did not dare to act recklessly. If Song Yun Xin killed him, it would be no different from dying in vain. If he died here, Song Yun Xin would have 10,000 reasons to shirk responsibility, so it was better to be honest. Jiu Yu stealthily glanced at Yu Qianqiu. Now anyone could tell that the young girl was most likely not ordinary. He did not know why she had called him over. She wanted to help him get out of trouble and not help the other two who were also from the immortal realm. If she said that she had feelings for him, that was simply nonsense. Could it be that he had discovered his secret? The Netherworld is indeed the Netherworld. It's very different from the immortal world. Yu Qianqiu sighed as he looked at the other side of the Netherworld River. Then he tilted his head to look at Jiu Yu, who was avoiding his gaze, and his lips curled into a smile. The reason why she protected him was not only because he had lived for a long time, but also because she felt that this wandering aquatic creature was hiding some secret, and it was a big secret that was waiting for her to unravel. The snow monsters charged forward, causing the ground to tremble. The surrounding snowy peaks finally began to crack, and in the blink of an eye, they began to collapse, creating avalanches. The snowy peaks that had shed their outer shell of snow immediately became much thinner, turning into icebergs wearing ice armor. Under the ice armor were dark peaks. It was unknown how many years these ice armors had been wrapped around these mountains. In the face of the incoming snow monsters, Zhou Xian looked straight ahead at the rumbling snow and stood there calmly. Ding Xiang, on the other hand, was a little impatient. He did not have Zhou Xian's ability to rely on, especially since these snow monsters were strange. They were definitely not that simple. The fact that they could not be killed was a very good proof. Ding Xiang did not dare to let these snow monsters get too close. He activated his sword art, and the flying sword turned into a long rainbow that rushed into the galloping snow monsters. After a round of killing, the snow fog in front of them was instantly filled with killing, and it did slightly slow down the speed of the snow monsters. However, it only slowed down the speed of the snow monsters slightly. The snow monsters that had been defeated rolled and crawled on the ground. They quickly merged with the snow and returned to their original form. They rushed out of the snow. No matter how powerful the flying sword was, even if it killed this group of snow monsters into pieces, the snow monsters continued to rush out of the thick snow. Ding Xiang immediately looked at Zhou Xian helplessly. Humph. Zhou Xian coldly snorted and flipped his sleeves to reveal two palms. His palms raised a thick astral energy and suddenly pushed at the incoming snow monsters. Boom! The surging astral winds howled out violently, and the snow monsters that were dozens of meters away from them were immediately blown away by the strong astral winds and struggled to move forward. In the blink of an eye, the snow monsters were blown away by the strong astral winds, and the layers of snow were peeled away. The charging head gradually shrank, followed by the forelegs and the running body. In the blink of an eye, the strong astral wind blew away the snow monsters, and they disappeared without a trace. Filled with confidence, Grey Cloud Xian snorted coldly and withdrew his palms. Ding Xiang was just about to clap his hands and flatter him when he saw dozens of blue ice crystals flashing in the wind and snow. They shone with a magnificent blue light and quickly drilled into the thick snow under the ground. Crack, crack. The snow in front of them cracked open and the snow monsters once again burrowed out of the ground. They were now only a few dozen meters away, and the dozens of snow monsters leaped over, arriving in the blink of an eye. Zhou Xian and Ding Xiang's expressions changed at the same time. Zhou Xian immediately raised his palms without hesitation and pushed out an even more violent astral wind. He sternly shouted, "Ding Xiang, those blue ice souls are the gate of life. Don't make pointless attacks. Wait for me to destroy this group of monsters, then use your flying sword to kill those ice souls." Okay. As the violent astral wind blew, Ding Xiang's flying sword was already dancing in the sky, waiting for an opportunity to strike. However, what caused the two's expressions to change was that this time, the snow monsters actually became smarter. Their bodies flashed with a blue light, and their bodies were covered in a layer of blue ice armor. They rushed toward the violent astral wind, and Tsurugun Xian's astral wind could no longer harm them in the slightest. The snow monsters instantly pounced at the two. Tsurugun Xian withdrew his palms and no longer made that pointless move. It was obvious that the astral wind had no effect on these snow monsters. His figure flashed and he took the initiative to rush into the group of snow monsters that were charging at him. He used the most primitive method of fighting, and waved his palm at a snow monster that was charging at him. His cultivation was not child's play, and his speed was far faster than these snow monsters. With a palm strike he could easily flatten a mountain to the ground. With a bang, a snow monster was blown to smithereens and sent flying. An azure ice soul immediately appeared, but it was immediately grabbed by Tsurugun Xian's claws. He directly pinched it between his 3 fingers, and it exploded into blue ice powder with a bang. On the other side, after Ding Xiang used his flying sword to kill a snow monster, he discovered that the snow monster had recovered. He immediately understood that although the flying sword was powerful, it was not effective against these snow monsters. Instead, Tsurugun Xian was more experienced. Thus he followed suit and the flying sword flashed into the storage bracelet on his wrist. His body flipped and his palms were like shadows. The dozens of snow monsters were smashed into powder one by one, and the ice souls hidden in their bodies had nowhere to hide. They were crushed into blue ice powder by the 2 of them. In the blink of an eye, the dozens of snow monsters were completely wiped out. The 2 of them thought that it was over, but after the blue ice powder fluttered in the air for a while, it quickly gathered together and became a dazzling azure ice soul again. The 2 of them were instantly speechless. Even Yu Qianqiu and Xin Yu, who were on the Netherworld River, were dumbfounded. They could not kill these things no matter what, so what was the point of continuing to fight? Yu Qianqiu was about to tell the 2 of them to leave, but he saw the girl standing on the ice peak wave her palms continuously, and countless azure ice souls shot into the snow at the foot of the ice mountain. In the blink of an eye, the snow arched and cracked everywhere, and hundreds and thousands of snow monsters crawled out of the ground. That was not the end. The girl then scattered several red ice souls to the foot of the mountain, and even more ferocious snow monsters crawled out of the snow. Each of their eyes emitted a terrifying red light. Finally, the girl scattered a handful of black ice souls to the foot of the mountain, but the black ice souls did not react for a long time after they were planted in the snow. However, the hundreds and thousands of snow monsters that had crawled out of the mountain were enough to make one's scalp numb. Moreover, these were some guys that could not be killed no matter what. A group of snow monsters began to rush over and the ground shook violently. The few of them felt that they had provoked a hornet's nest. Old Tsong, capture the leader first. Yu Qianqiu suddenly shouted while staring at the girl. Immediately, Songyun Xian understood what he meant. He flashed into the air and directly shot toward the girl on the ice peak. Unexpectedly, there were 10 consecutive explosions in the snow at the foot of the ice peak. 10 black ice armored warriors crawled out of the ground, and 5 of them intercepted Songyun Xian in the air. In an instant they began to fight in the air and they did not seem to be at a disadvantage at all. The other 5 black ice armored warriors formed a pentagonal formation and spread out around the girl in the air. It was obvious that they were protecting her. In the beginning, Songyun Xian did not take these black ice armored warriors seriously. However, after fighting with them in the air he was immediately shocked. He realized that the cultivation of these ice armored warriors was actually not weaker than the early stage Netherworld Emperor. In other words, there were 5 early stage Netherworld Emperor experts surrounding him, a mid-stage Immortal Emperor expert. Due to a moment of carelessness he was caught off guard and surrounded by these ice armored warriors. He did not even have the chance to draw his sword and was at a loss for words. He never dreamed that a girl who seemed to be an early-stage Netherworld Venerable would actually have so many early-stage Netherworld Emperor experts protecting her. It was a little shocking. He could not help but suspect this girl's identity, and he did not know who she was. The battle in the air was very lively. The 5 black shadows that surrounded Songyun Xian were as fast as phantoms, and did not give Songyun Xian any chance to escape. Songyun Xian was furious. He was tired of dealing with them, but he had to be patient and carefully protect himself, waiting for an opportunity to draw his sword and use a fatal killing move. On the other side of the Netherworld River, Yu Qianqiu and Xin Yu turned pale with fright. They didn't expect that with Grey Cloud Xian's cultivation he would be beaten by a few icemen to the point where he could only defend himself. Moreover, there were still 5 icemen eyeing him covetously from the side. They hadn't even joined in the attack on Grey Cloud Xian. The most frightening thing was that these snow monsters could not be killed at all. What the hell? Who was this woman? Could she be the Snow Empress of the Netherworld realm in this million-mile snowy mountain? But she did not look like it. Xianxia's eyes flickered incessantly. Now he vaguely understood why the people from the Immortal dimension were unable to leave this place alive. Just think about it, any random person that came out was able to bring along so many experts. How could ordinary experts from the Immortal dimension resist them? Chapter 1017. On the other side of the Netherworld River, Ding Xiang, who was dealing with hundreds and thousands of snow monsters by himself, was in even more pain. The snow monsters formed by the azure ice spirits swarmed over, and some leaped down from above, wrapping him up into a ball. However, this was nothing. His body was very fast and his palms were like shadows. He could shatter one with each palm. Although he didn't have time to shatter their ice spirits, with his late-stage great immortal cultivation he could barely deal with them. However, ever since the 100 snow monsters with glowing red eyes joined the attack, he almost burst into tears. These snow monsters with red eyes weren't something he could shatter with a single palm strike. As soon as he clashed with them, he realized that the snow monsters with blue ice souls were only at the level of underworld sages, but the ones with red eyes were at the level of underworld venerables. They weren't too far off from his level of cultivation. At most he could push them back with one palm. If he used more force he could crack them. However, when they rolled on the ground they would immediately recover. He couldn't hurt them, couldn't kill them, and there were so many of them. Imagine if nearly 100 of these snow monsters surrounded Ding Xiang, and nearly 1,000 snow monsters with azure ice spirits swarmed him, what would happen to him? Amidst the deafening roars, Ding Xiang's clothes were in tatters, and his body was full of injuries. He was on the brink of death. He was filled with regret now. What was she doing here with these 2 fellows in a trance? In such a crazy group fight, Ding Xiang's figure could no longer be seen from the outside. They could only guess that Ding Xiang was still alive and not dead from the snow monster's movements, the sounds of fighting and Ding Xiang's angry roars. On the other side of the Netherworld River, Yu Qianqiu and Xin Yu's scalps were numb. One really couldn't judge a book by its cover. The few men thought that the young lady was easy to bully, but when she showed her power, the few men together were not enough to fight her. The young lady just stood there like she was watching a show. Wee. Xin Yu muttered a few times. He looked at the Netherworld River in front of him and was implicitly reminding Yu Qianqiu if they should escape first. His cultivation wasn't considered high among the Styx's water tribe, but it wasn't by luck that he had lived for so long. Most importantly, if you can't win, don't force yourself. If you need to compromise, do so. If you need to escape, do so. Face is worthless. Never try to be a hero. This was his secret trick. However, this time he couldn't run away even if he wanted to. His body was sealed by Yu Qianqiu. Without Yu Qianqiu's permission, running away would be a dead end. Therefore he wanted to kindly remind Yu Qianqiu that it was time for them to run. He felt that Yu Qianqiu was not a person with a strong backbone. He could tell that Yu Qianqiu was not an ordinary person just by watching the fire from the other side. How can you abandon your friends when they are in danger? Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and warned. He turned around and did not say anything else. His reasoning was good, but he didn't see him helping his friends when they were in danger. In fact, he wanted to run when he saw this scene. However, if he wanted to run, it would be a matter of seconds. There was no hurry. Even if he wanted to run, he had to wait until Zhou Xian was dead. This was because Zhou Xian was trapped now. He hadn't used his true trump card. He had seen Zhou Xian's 3-in-1 sword drawing technique with his own eyes. Its power was like the explosion of a nuclear weapon. Once Zhou Xian pulled out the last sword, these snow monsters would be like clay chickens and pottery dogs. They would not be able to withstand a single blow. Therefore it wasn't time to run yet. At this moment, Ding Xiang, who was surrounded by a group of snow monsters and wrapped into a big bun, suddenly shouted, "Soaring dragon!" Suddenly, a hoarse roar came from the stuffed bun. It was obvious that it couldn't hold on any longer and wanted to fight for its life. In the middle of the big bun that was made of snow monsters, a white pillar of light suddenly erupted into the sky. With a bang, all the snow monsters that were pouncing toward the center were sent flying. The power was really shocking. The shockwave even forced the two people on the other side of the sticks to take a few steps back. Ding Xiang, who was almost completely naked, rushed into the sky. He didn't care about anything else. He broke out of the encirclement and immediately fled into the distance. However, what he didn't expect was yet to come. The hundreds of red-eyed snow monsters that were sent flying rolled on the ground and immediately turned into huge snow eagles. They flapped their wings and turned into white shadows that quickly chased after Ding Xiang. The other thousands of azure icy soul snow monsters followed suit and rolled on the ground. In an instant, an overwhelming number of snow eagles rose into the sky and chased after Ding Xiang. Oh no. Old Ding probably wouldn't be able to escape this time. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed. He and Xinyu looked at each other and saw the same worry in each other's eyes. Xinyu was depressed. You're not helping them and you're not running away. Are you waiting for them to kill those two fellows and then free up their hands to deal with us? He pouted at the flowing sticks in front of him. His meaning was to remind him that they really should go. If they waited any longer it would be troublesome. Yu Qianqiu put his hands behind his back and snorted coldly. He stood straight and motionless, showing his attitude. Xinyu looked at him and his expression kept twitching. If it wasn't for the restriction, he really wanted to go over and kick him a few times before running away. However, Yu Qianqiu's unyielding and arrogant look inadvertently fell into the eyes of Grey Cloud Exin, who was tired of dealing with them. He suddenly looked like an idler who was watching the fire from the other side of the river. He immediately roared, "Yu Qianqiu, what are you watching? If I die you won't live either. Come and help me so that I can free up my hands to deal with them." Yu Qianqiu was stunned when he heard that. He secretly sneered and thought disdainfully, even if you die 10,000 times, I'll still run away and live well. He looked up at the 5 black-armored warriors beside the girl and shrugged helplessly. He shouted loudly, "Old Song, it's not that I don't want to help you. If I help you, it'll be the same as harming you. My small body can't handle the other 5. If something happens to me, then even if you can pass this trial, you won't be able to pass the Immortal Emperor's trial. Death is still the only path for you. You'd better fight calmly and slowly look for a favorable opportunity. You also saw that in such a critical situation I, Yu Qianqiu, am standing here with an indomitable spirit. Have I ever tried to escape alone? Look at that Ding Xiang, he only cares about running for his life. This kind of person will sooner or later suffer retribution." ***. Songyun Exin, who was trapped and struggling to deal with the other 5 black-armored warriors, understood that what Yu Qianqiu said was reasonable. Once Yu Qianqiu came to help, the 5 black-armored warriors would definitely attack Yu Qianqiu. With Yu Qianqiu's cultivation he would be killed in a few moves, and Songyun Exin would not be able to save him at the moment. However, he really couldn't stand Yu Qianqiu's leisurely look. He couldn't help but shout angrily, "Do you think I'm blind? If Ding Xiang doesn't run away he'll die here." Bing. A loud sound was heard, followed by a muffled groan from Grey Cloud Exin. He had been distracted by Yu Qianqiu's words, and had been kicked in the shoulder by a black-armored warrior. He had almost been kicked in the head. He immediately shut his mouth and focused on fighting the enemy. "Old Song, are you okay?" Yu Qianqiu asked with concern, gritting his teeth as if the kick had landed on his body. "Shut up." Songyun Exin shouted again. He had really made up his mind not to speak anymore. If he continued to speak, even if he didn't get beaten to death, he would die from anger. Yu Qianqiu just tilted his chin at Jiu Yu helplessly, as if saying that his good intentions were not reciprocated. Suddenly he heard a shrill cry for help from the distant sky. "Yu Qianqiu, come and save me." It was Ding Xiang's voice. Was he still alive? Yu Qianqiu looked up in surprise and saw a group of white shadows chasing after Ding Xiang, who was running naked in the sky. Yu Qianqiu's expression instantly changed. It was true that this guy came to ask for help, but wasn't he just looking for trouble? A panicked look flashed across Jiu Yu's face. He pulled on Yu Qianqiu's sleeve as if saying, "I know you're not a gentleman, so stop pretending and let's escape." The two of them didn't know that Ding Xiang was really at his wit's end. Because he had used up too much of his cultivation, his speed in the sky was not enough to escape from the group of red-eyed snow eagles and escape from this vast snowy region. Moreover, because he had to take care of more positions in the sky, he had almost forced himself into a dead end. In desperation he remembered that there was still Yu Qianqiu and Xinyu who were free. Although he knew that their cultivations were not that great and the chances of them saving him were very small, they were more or less his last straw of hope, right? There was no reason not to come. Seeing the overwhelming number of snow eagles chasing after Ding Xiang, Yu Qianqiu immediately pointed in the direction of Grey Cloud Exon and shouted to Ding Xiang, "Ding Xiang, hurry up and go to Grey Cloud Exon. He can't escape now. If you help him create a chance, he will be able to escape and use the Heartless Palace's 3 swords in 1 sword drawing technique. My cultivation can't save you, only Grey Cloud Exon can." He was almost screaming at the top of his lungs. He was worried that Ding Xiang would attract the overwhelming disaster over. Ding Xiang, who was running away in a panic, looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was desperately waving at him to go away. He was really close to tears. "I'm already here." However, he knew that what Yu Qianqiu said made sense. He couldn't save him, only Grey Cloud Exon could save him. For his life. Ding Xiang glanced at the large group of snow eagles that had already caught up to him. Without hesitation, he dashed in the direction of Grey Cloud Exon. "Hi!" He forced himself to shout. He was prepared to do his best to create a chance for Grey Cloud Exon to escape. Then he would enjoy Grey Cloud Exon's protection. Grey Cloud Exon's spirit was lifted when he heard this. It was great that Ding Xiang could come and help him. However, although their thoughts were good, the reality was cruel. 2 of the 5 ice-armored warriors beside the young girl immediately dashed out and stood in front of Ding Xiang. Their dark, icy eyes stared at Ding Xiang. Ding Xiang was dumbfounded. This black ice-armored warrior was able to force Zhang Yun Exin to such a state. Needless to say, he would not be able to deal with any one of them, let alone 2 of them. Chapter 10:18. What should I do? I can't go to Ash Grey Cloud Exon anymore, or I'll die even faster. Ding Xiang decided to look for Yu Qianqiu, his only life-saving straw. In a panic, he rushed into the sky, trying to avoid the snow eagles that had already caught up to him. The 2 ice-armored warriors seemed to have no intention of taking his life. They let him escape and flashed back to the girl's side to protect her. However, this time Ding Xiang had nowhere to run. It was extremely difficult to rush to Yu Qianqiu's side. Thousands of snow eagles had already spread out a net and were ready to pounce. In an instant they swarmed over. "Ah! Yu Qianqiu, save me!" Ding Xiang screamed in pain as he was directly beaten to the ground by the group of snow eagles. He was not far from where he was initially surrounded. At this time, Ding Xiang's cultivation was almost exhausted, and he could no longer fight back like before. He really could not hold on any longer, and he did not have the energy to resist anymore. Therefore he simply accepted his fate, closed his eyes and stood there waiting for his fate. However, the strange thing was that once he stopped resisting, the group of snow eagles actually stopped attacking as well. Dozens of them spread their wings and hugged him tightly. The other snow eagles opened their mouths at Ding Xiang, who was hugged into a ball and spat out thick, cold white fog. In an instant, the cold white fog spread everywhere, and within it, there were snow eagles constantly flying up and down. When the group of snow eagles stopped flapping their wings in the air, the white fog that filled the air gradually dissipated, and a huge crystal-clear ice block appeared in its place. Ding Xiang, who was almost naked, was frozen inside, motionless. His twisted expression was clearly visible, and there were dozens of blue ice souls surrounding him, dyeing his skin slightly blue. This scene stunned Yu Qianqiu and Xinyu, who were on the other side of the river Styx, and they could not help but look at the girl standing on the ice peak. Coincidentally, the girl also looked over. Her mouth opened and closed slightly. Her voice was too soft to hear what she said, but Yu Qianqiu could tell from the familiar shape of her mouth that she said the word "big liar." Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk. At this moment, the snow eagles that were hovering in the air on the other side of the river Styx seemed to have received some sort of instruction, and all of them charged towards Yu Qianqiu and Yu Qianqiu. Xinyu panicked. As expected, he was going to deal with the 2 of them as soon as he could. He grabbed Yu Qianqiu and said, "Let's go. Go hide in the river Styx for now. I'll deal with them." Yu Qianqiu shrugged him off. Hearing this, Xinyu did not hesitate anymore. He dashed into the river Styx in a flash and disappeared without even looking back. He ran far away in an instant and stuck his head out of the river Styx to watch from afar. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes as he stared at the group of snow eagles that were charging towards him. The corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Thousands of purple flame high-energy blades had already silently formed around his body, and they quickly densely covered the sky above the river Styx. When the group of snow eagles neared the river Styx, he suddenly stretched out his hand and opened his claws. The invisible purple flame high-energy blades suddenly attacked. In an instant, the snow eagles above the river Styx screeched. The snow eagles that were charging towards him were in a mess in the air, but they could not resist the purple flame high-energy blades. In an instant, chunks of snow fell into the river Styx. The snow eagles that were missing wings, legs, or heads in the air wanted to flash back to the snow on the other side of the river Styx to rearm themselves. However, Xianxia was only using them to test the group attack power of the purple fire high-energy blade. The reason he was able to stand there so calmly without running away was because he naturally had a killing move to deal with these snow monsters. Otherwise, it would be strange if he didn't panic. He spread his fingers in the air, and thousands of purple flame high-energy blades instantly melted into intense purple flames. They were still invisible, and they immediately wrapped around the snow monsters that were trying to escape. Instantly vaporized. A vast white mist suddenly appeared above the Netherworld River and rose. Close to 1,000 snow monsters that were killed by the purple flame high-energy sword were instantly vaporized by the high temperature. Close to 1,000 blue or red ice souls immediately appeared above the Netherworld River. Xianxia looked strangely at the stunned girl on the ice peak and smiled. He moved his fingers slightly, and the high temperature immediately wrapped around thousands of ice spirits. Immediately, the red and blue ice spirits above the river Styx trembled. They wanted to get rid of the terrifying high temperature that wrapped around them and restrained them. However, they did not have the strength to do so. They had encountered something that was their natural nemesis. The bright red and blue colors of the ice soul gradually faded, and its body gradually shrunk into mist. A painful moan that sounded like a soul being tortured rang out in the sky above the Styx. The sound was so repetitive that it made people panic. It was as if the entire night sky was echoing with this terrifying sound. Xianxia looked up at the sky in surprise. He felt that every ice spirit seemed to have a person's soul in it. It was very strange. Seeing that all the ice souls had turned into mist and disappeared, the silent, agonizing sounds of struggling slowly disappeared. The girl on the ice peak opened her mouth slightly and looked at Xianxia in disbelief. So this cowardly guy hiding at the side was the real expert among these people. Xinyu, who was far away on the surface of the river Styx, was also dumbfounded. Grey Cloud Xian, who had taken the time to pay attention to this side, was instantly energized. He said, Xianxia, if you have the ability, don't hide it anymore. Come and help me. Xianxia ignored him for the time being. The intense high temperature condensed into purple flame high-energy blades again and distributed them around his body as a guard. He quickly looked around. He was worried that these ice spirits would revive again. After waiting for a while, he heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that there was no reaction. He thought to himself that the high temperature was indeed the nemesis of these snow monsters. Then he flashed to the other side of the river. Looking at Ding Xiang, who was frozen in the huge ice block, Xianxia's brows twitched slightly. The purple flame high-energy blades beside him immediately broke down into several pieces and enveloped the huge ice block with high temperature. Immediately, the huge ice block vaporized and shrunk. However, before the huge ice block completely melted, the remaining ice blocks immediately exploded. Dozens of blue ice spirits quickly flew away as if they had seen a ghost. Xianxia did not make things difficult for them. The main reason was that he did not want to hear that damned sound again. He put away the purple flame high-energy blades and looked at Ding Xiang, who was standing there stiffly. He released his divine sense to check on him and found that his heart was beating weakly. With his cultivation he should not die. After all, the physical body of an immortal was different from that of a mortal. It would not be so easy for him to die. You are from the celestial world's heartless palace? A terrifying cold snort suddenly echoed in the surroundings. It was a stranger's voice. Xianxia suddenly raised his head. The 5 black-armored warriors that were fighting fiercely with Songyun Exen suddenly retreated and returned to the top of the ice mountain. They saw that the 10 black-armored warriors were surrounding the young girl, and there was a man and a woman standing on each side. The man was tall and had a sharp face. He had an extraordinary aura. The woman was elegant and dazzling. Both of them were dressed in white. The 3 of them stood together. Especially the way the young girl looked at them, it was obvious that they were a family of 3. A family of 3 suddenly appeared in this godforsaken place. Coupled with the fact that the young girl could summon so many snow monsters to protect her, Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Exin immediately thought of the legendary Snow Emperor and Snow Queen. The young girl was naturally the daughter that had been injured by someone from the celestial world. Facing a great enemy, Songyun Exin, who had his hands free, was shocked. His right hand had already reached for the storage bracelet on his left wrist. The man standing on the ice mountain stared sharply at Songyun Exin's hand movements. He said slowly, "Looks like Wang Qing didn't send you to find me." Hearing this, Songyun Exin was slightly startled. He didn't want to act rashly. He slowly let go of the storage bracelet and said in shock, "You know our sect leader? Just an old friend from many years ago." The white-robed man's tone gradually turned cold. "I didn't think that the Heartless Palace would have another mid-stage immortal emperor expert. Since Wang Qing didn't send you, why did you trespass into my Great Snow Mountain?" His words clearly showed that he was the master of Great Snow Mountain. Songyun Exin looked at the couple's cultivation. They were indeed mid-stage underworld emperor. He cupped his hands and said, "I am Heartless Palace's consecrator, Songyun Exin. You must be Snow Emperor and Snow Queen. Sorry for being impolite. Since you already know, don't be so long-winded." Snow Emperor's eyes were sharp. "Let me ask you, why did you trespass into my Great Snow Mountain and attack my daughter?" "Father." The young girl pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said indignantly, "This big liar killed close to 1,000 of my Ice Soul warriors. He even lied to me that." She revealed everything that Yu Qianqiu had lied to her in one breath. On the other side, Yu Qianqiu was instantly speechless. He didn't think that he would be so unlucky to offend the daughter of Snow Emperor and Snow Queen. On the other side, Snow Queen's eyes were already filled with killing intent. She stared at Yu Qianqiu with a majestic aura and shouted, "How dare you!" Luckily, Songyun Exin still wanted to protect Yu Qianqiu. He hurriedly continued, "I didn't mean to offend your daughter. I was really framed by Li Palace's Aqua Race's crown prince, Li Zhong." He immediately recounted what happened at the Dragon Transformation Gate and how he was forced out of the river Styx by Li Zhong. It wasn't that Songyun Exin was really afraid of them, but that they were old friends with sect master Wang Qing. The family of three looked at Yu Qianqiu in surprise. The killing intent on Snow Queen's face instantly disappeared. She said in surprise, "You helped the fourth crown prince of Li Palace make the great leap?" After seriously sizing him up, the husband and wife immediately realized that they couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. They looked at each other in bewilderment. It was just a coincidence." Yu Qianqiu smiled modestly. Songyun Exin cupped his hands in a timely manner and said, "I hope that Snow Emperor and Snow Empress can be magnanimous and let us go on account that we didn't mean to offend you. We will leave this place immediately and not disturb you again. On account of Wang Qing I can let you go." The Snow Empress suddenly stared at Yu Qianqiu and said, "No matter how high your cultivation is, since you dared to bully my daughter, even if we die we will fight you and seek justice." What she meant was that she thought that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was too high, and the husband and wife were prepared to join forces to seek justice from Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was depressed. "Why would there be a need for the two of you to join forces? One of you is enough to deal with me." Chapter 10:19. The young girl immediately became nervous when she heard this. She didn't expect to hear the words "even if one of us dies" from her father's mouth. Thinking back to how Yu Qianqiu had killed over 1,000 of her Ice Soul warriors with a wave of his hand, she immediately regarded Yu Qianqiu as an expert among experts, and began to worry about her parents' safety. Songyun Exin was a little puzzled. Even the Li Palace's Sea tribe knew about this, but this Snow Empress of the Netherworld actually knew nothing about it. Her information source was really blocked. Yu Qianqiu also had the same doubts. Songyun Exin cupped his hands and said, "Snow Empress is too serious. Yu Qianqiu is only at the early stage of small immortal. He only used a few concealment techniques to prevent others from seeing through his cultivation. Many people in the Netherworld know about this, so Snow Empress will know once she asks around." The husband and wife were stunned when they heard this, and began to re-evaluate Yu Qianqiu. Being looked at like this made Yu Qianqiu feel very awkward. It doesn't matter if it's real or fake. Snow Empress pointed at Yu Qianqiu and snorted coldly. "You dare to bully my daughter, then leave your life behind. Songyun Exin, on account of Wang Qing and on account that nothing has happened to my daughter, you can leave. If he stays, there's still him." She pointed at Ding Xiang, who had just recovered. Ding Xiang, who was almost running naked, had actually heard everything. He was happy that he wasn't mentioned, but when he turned around and saw the appearance of Snow Empress and Snow Empress, he saw Snow Empress pointing at him. His expression immediately froze, and he nervously took out a set of clothes from his storage bangle to put them on. Yu Qianqiu, who wanted to say a few more words, realized that Snow Empress wouldn't make an exception, so he simply shut his mouth and didn't bother to say anything. In any case, Songyun Xin wouldn't let anything happen to him. Taking 10,000 steps back, he could escape at any time, so there was nothing to be afraid of. He calmed down, but Songyun Xin said with a dark expression, "It's not that I don't want to give the Snow Emperor face, but I received the decree of the sect leader to protect him. Actually, I don't want to protect him. He killed my grandson, so he is my enemy. I want to tear his tendons and skin his bones. However, if something happens to him, my heartless palace, including the sect leader, will face a disaster. I have no way out, so I have to protect him. Snow Empress, please give face to the sect leader of the Heartless Palace and be merciful." When he said that, both husband and wife were a little surprised. The Snow Emperor looked Yu Qianqiu up and down and said in a low voice, "What you mean is that if something happens to him, even Wang Qing will be implicated? Could it be that he has some sort of background? Could he be someone from the Immortal World's Immortal Palace?" "More or less." Songyun Xan nodded. Although he didn't know what the relationship between the Snow Emperor and sect leader Wang Qing was, he heard that the Snow Emperor would kill anyone from the Immortal World who trespassed into the Great Snow Mountain, but he was lenient to the people of the Heartless Palace. It was obvious that his relationship with sect leader Wang Qing was not ordinary. Therefore, Songyun Xan briefly recounted how Yu Qianqiu received the decree of the Immortal Emperor, and how the Heartless Palace received the decree of the Immortal Palace to protect Yu Qianqiu. Compose for Jin Tai's wedding? The Snow Empress lost her voice in surprise. Even the young girl and the mother and daughter looked at Yu Qianqiu in disbelief. The mother and daughter naturally knew what kind of person the Immortal Emperor Jin Tai was. He was a supreme being in the immortal world that was equivalent to the underworld emperor of the underworld. For someone like Jin Tai to personally mention him and send an expert to protect him, one could imagine how talented he was. The mother and daughter's eyes couldn't help but shine. Women naturally yearned for such beautiful things, so they had low immunity to such things. It was just that the two of them didn't dare to believe that this ordinary-looking guy was really so talented. Compose? The Snow Empress frowned and was a little confused. Since Jin Tai asked you to protect him, why did the two of you come to the underworld? What does this have to do with composing? Songyun Xan looked at Yu Qianqiu and sneered. This guy is very original. He said that in order to compose a song that will satisfy the Immortal Emperor, he wants to travel the world to increase his experience. He called it gathering some local customs. Who knows what he's trying to do? Gathering local customs. The Snow Empress paused for a moment. Then she roughly understood the meaning of this phrase, but she was more hesitant. Her family owed Wang Qing a big favor. If this matter really involved Wang Qing's safety, she really couldn't do anything to Yu Qianqiu. Just as she was frowning and hesitating, she suddenly heard the faint, excited voice of her wife. After hearing what she said, she couldn't help but roll her eyes. She slightly glanced at her daughter and found that there was indeed a trace of excitement hidden in her eyes. She seemed to want to say something but was hesitant. It was very rare. Then she looked at her wife. She had the same behavior as her daughter. Women. After being speechless for a while, the Snow Empress didn't know what to say. Finally, she coughed and said with a stern face, "For Wang Qing's sake, I cannot pursue this matter. But we only have one daughter. How can we let her suffer? If you can find a way to get my daughter's forgiveness, I can let bygones be bygones." He really couldn't say the real reason. Songyun Xan was stunned. The Snow Empress had already made a concession, so he couldn't say anything else. He turned to look at Yu Qianqiu and transmitted his voice. "You killed so many of her Ice Soul warriors. If you want her to forgive you, I'm afraid it's useless. Anyway, you have a sharp tongue. You can coax her yourself." "That's true." Yu Qianqiu's eyes turned. Just as he was preparing to use his glib tongue to trick the lady, the Snow Empress smiled gently at the Snow Empress and said, "No matter what, we have some friendship with Wang Qing. Since he is Wang Qing's people, he can also be considered a guest. It's not good to let a guest stand in the wild. Why don't you invite the guest back to the Ice Palace? We can talk about it slowly." Once she said this, the Snow Empress immediately glared at her. Yu Qianqiu and Song Yun Exin became a little wary because of the sudden change in the other party's attitude. Women are the most vicious. They suspected that the other party had some tricks up her sleeves. Seeing that the Snow Empress didn't say anything, the Snow Empress took it that he agreed. She immediately smiled at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Don't doubt my intentions. I'll tell you the truth. Bringing you to the Ice Palace is indeed to put you under house arrest. But on account of Wang Qing, as long as you are obedient, I won't do anything to you. You can rest assured about this. Of course, if you can get my daughter to forgive you, then it's another matter. As long as my daughter nods, she will immediately let you go. If my daughter isn't willing to forgive you, then..." As she said this, she looked at Song Yun Exin and smiled coldly. "We have to give face to Wang Qing, but not everyone can trample on our dignity. When the time comes, I'll have to trouble Consecrator Tsong to return to the Celestial Realm's Heartless Palace and ask Wang Qing to personally come and take us away. My wife and I can also catch up with him. Consecrator Tsong, Yu Qianqiu, I'm not making things difficult for you, right?" "This," Song Yun Exin muttered to himself. If it was to save trouble, he was still confident in his 3 swords as 1 sword drawing style. It wasn't that he didn't dare to fight with this couple. But since they had already mentioned that they were old friends with sect leader Wang Qing, he couldn't force them. Unable to make a decision, he couldn't help but ask Yu Qianqiu, "What do you think?" "Zai. It's better to be kind if I can." Who asked the other party to be an expert. "Do I still want to survive in the netherworld?" Yu Qianqiu chuckled and said, "You can make the decision. I have no objections. Now it's up to me to make the decision." Song Yun Exin gritted his teeth and cupped his fists towards the family of 3. "Since Snow Empress has said so much, I'll naturally obey." Snow Empress smiled as she looked at her daughter, whose eyes were flickering. Suddenly, her expression turned cold as she looked towards the river of Netherworld. "The one who is hiding in the river and eavesdropping on us. Since when did the river of Netherworld's water tribe like to do such sneaky things?" Xin Yu, who was hiding on the shore of the river of Netherworld, had a change in expression. He hurriedly scuttled out of the river and obediently skimmed to Yu Qianqiu's side. Yu Qianqiu immediately cupped his fists and smiled apologetically at Snow Empress. "He is with us. He has always been timid. Please forgive him, Snow Empress." Snow Empress raised her eyebrows on her fair and plump face. She clicked her tongue and said, "How did the river of Netherworld's water tribe mix with the people from the immortal world? Strange." She didn't intend to pursue the matter any further. She turned to Snow Empress, who had a long face, and said with a smile, "Husband, you don't have any objections if I handle it this way, right?" Snow Empress couldn't do anything to the mother and daughter. She turned into a beam of white light and flew away. Snow Empress chuckled and waved at the 10 black ice-armored warriors around her. The ice-armored warriors instantly turned from black to crystal clear. Black ice crystals were spat out and fell into her hands. Then she pulled her daughter and chased after Snow Empress. Yu Qianqiu and the others stared at the lifeless ice-armored warriors for a while. They looked at each other and helplessly flew after them. On the vast snowfield, there were mountains rising and falling. The sky was black and the ground was white. It was such a clear contrast between black and white. After spending half a day, Yu Qianqiu and the others landed on an ice cliff halfway up a majestic snowy mountain. The ice cliff was icy blue, and its surface area was at least 1,000 square meters. However, compared to the entire majestic snowy mountain, it was really too small. The heavy snow didn't stop. It was still falling and the wind was blowing even more fiercely. There were crystal clear pavilions on the ice cliff, as well as all kinds of strange flowers and plants carved out of ice. These ice sculptures contained ice crystals of various colors. There were probably more than 10,000 of them. They were frozen in the ice sculptures, making all the ice sculptures look like colorful ice lanterns. In this pitch-black underworld, they seemed to be unique. There was a cave residence on the mountain wall behind the ice cliff. The laughter of Snow Empress came from inside. "Those who come are guests. Everyone come in." They couldn't help but take a few more glances at the ice sculptures outside. Because they casually glanced at them and found that there were at least dozens of the black ice crystals that they had seen before in the ice sculptures. Thinking of the power of those black ice-armored warriors, they were shocked. Especially Grey Cloud Exin, who was secretly shocked. He didn't expect that there were so many early-stage underworld emperor experts under the Snow Empress. The few of them slowly walked into the cave with a bellyful of questions. They were all wondering what kind of treasure this ice soul was refined from. It could actually condense into all kinds of animals to fight with humans. Moreover, it was divided into different levels of cultivation. How could those who had bitterly cultivated endure this? It was simply unimaginable. Seeing so many ice crystals, Xianxia suddenly felt a little itchy. Chapter 10:20. The Netherworld is a world of ice and snow. It's not as clear as the sun, moon, and stars of the immortal world. Although these ice caves are not as pleasing to the eye as the immortal world's sleeping quarters, they are all sculpted from 100-million-year-old ice. Cultivating here for a year is equivalent to cultivating in other places for 10 years. Not to mention the immortal world, even in the Netherworld, it's hard to find such a good place for cultivation. The Snow Empress led them around the ice palace and giggled as she pointed to a few rooms and introduced them. Finally, she smiled sweetly at them and said, "Don't worry and stay here. If you need anything, just come and find me. I won't keep you company." With that, she left with a bright smile on her face. Stay here? Xianxia and the others were speechless as they watched her round and perky figure disappear at the end of the ice palace corridor. They weren't attracted by the Snow Empress's plump beauty, but they were confused and didn't know what this flirtatious woman was up to. The Netherworld Snow Empress actually acted like a brothel keeper and brought guests to look at the rooms. It was really out of their expectations. Was this woman scheming, or was she a fickle woman? They looked at each other. Xianxia scratched his head and said, "Didn't you want me to get the princess's forgiveness? What do you mean by letting us stay here?" Ding Xiang's face was also filled with suspicion. That's strange. Even if they're here to receive guests, how come they don't see any subordinates in this huge ice palace? To actually trouble the Snow Empress to personally receive them, it really makes us feel fear and trepidation. His current impression of Xianxia could be said to be extremely good. Grey Cloud Exen snorted coldly and said, "She just wants peace and freedom. She wants subordinates, there are many. Didn't you see her scattering beans to form soldiers?" When they recalled the scene of the ice souls turning into snow monsters, they all fell silent. Xianxia paused for a moment before turning around and walking into a room. The others curiously followed him in. There was no door to cover the room, only a winding entrance to prevent people from peeping into the room. There were no extra furnishings in the room, not even a table or chair. There was only a wide ice couch which looked very monotonous. The inside was the same as the outside, ice blue and cool. In fact, the entire ice palace was directly dug out from a huge iceberg. No one knew how long this iceberg had existed. Perhaps, as Snow Empress said, it really had hundreds of millions of years of history. There was no need for lighting inside the ice palace. The ice layer emitted a faint sapphire blue light. The colors were magnificent and dreamlike. They looked at several rooms in a row. They were all of the same style, probably specially used to entertain guests. Therefore, there was nothing for everyone to choose. Each of them chose a room to stay temporarily. Only Zhou did not choose and followed Xianxia. However, not long after, Grey Cloud Xen and Ding Xiang and Ding Ding barged into Xianxia's room. Xianxia was lying on the ice couch with his but facing the outside, hugging his head and sleeping. Xinyu was sitting cross-legged on the ground. After seeing the two come in, Zhu stood up. Songyun Xen couldn't stand it anymore. He immediately kicked the ice couch and said angrily, "Look at you. Do you really want to stay here forever?" "I'm trying to figure out a way to leave this place," Xianxia said as he laid there motionlessly with his eyes closed. "Have you figured it out yet?" Songyun Xen said in a mocking tone. "What are you all thinking about?" The Snow Empress laughter suddenly came from outside the door. Everyone turned around and saw the Snow Empress walking over with an ice tray. There were over 10 perfectly round white fruits the size of eggs on the ice tray. The Snow Empress stared blankly at Xianxia, who was lying on the ice couch with his head turned. She didn't expect him to still be in the mood to sleep. Xianxia immediately jumped up and chuckled, indicating that he didn't do it on purpose and was embarrassed. Songyun Xen looked at the things in the Snow Empress' hands and muttered, "Snow Empress, this is?" The Snow Empress chuckled and said, "There's nothing to entertain you in this world of ice and snow. This is the Great Snow Mountain's specialty, the ice-snow underworld fruit. It's a good thing for netherworld cultivators to recover their lost cultivation. However, ordinary netherworld cultivators don't have the chance to taste it. At the same time, although it's good, it doesn't have much effect for you immortal world cultivators. However, the taste is passable, so I specially brought it for everyone to try. A plate of fruits was placed on the ice couch. The round and white fruits looked delightful, but no one dared to take them to try. Xianxia cupped his hands and said politely, "How dare we trouble the Snow Empress to do this?" The Snow Empress glanced at them and said with a smile, "Why? Are you worried that I'll poison you?" Her words hit everyone's concerns. Xianxia immediately smiled and tried to smooth things over. "Snow Empress, you're exaggerating. We offended the princess unintentionally and are feeling guilty. Even if the delicacy is in our mouths, it's like chewing wax. We really don't have the mood to eat. I wonder where the princess is. I'm in a hurry to apologize to the princess and hope to get her forgiveness. I hope the Snow Empress can help me." The Snow Empress replied with an "oh," and said with a smile, "I'm afraid you're in a hurry to leave this place." She pointed at the plate of fruits and said, "Eat this fruit first, then I'll bring you to see my daughter." The few of them stared at Xianxia. Xianxia was startled. Just as he was about to reach out to take it, Xianxian's voice sounded in his ears. "Be careful, it's a trap. Find a reason to refuse." Poison? What a joke. I'm not even afraid of the famous soul transformation smoke. Why would I be afraid of this? Xianxia smiled and ignored Xianxian's voice to stop him again. He directly picked up a fruit the size of an egg and stuffed it into his mouth to chew. Once the skin of the fruit broke, the cold and sweet liquid flowed into his throat. There was no pit, and even the skin was swallowed into his stomach. The fragrance lingered in his mouth and the aftertaste was endless. His eyes lit up and he praised, "It's really good stuff, the taste is not bad." Then he grabbed another one from the plate and stuffed it into his mouth. He nodded at the few of them, expressing that the taste was not bad. Xianxian's face darkened. If there was really poison, he would be implicated if something happened to Xianxia. The Snow Empress glanced at the few of them, and her gaze finally landed on Xianxia. Her eyes were full of praise and she smiled sweetly without concealment. "What a courageous man. No wonder you can gain Jintai's favor. I like it. Since you want to see my daughter, come with me." The unique charm of ice and snow that she exuded could not help but make the hearts of the men palpitate. The few of them were speechless as they watched Xianxia leave with the Snow Empress. Xianxia wanted to follow, but he was rejected by the Snow Empress. The plate of fruits on the ice couch was also taken away by the Snow Empress. She seemed to be angry at them for not knowing what was good for them. In the corridor of the ice palace, Xianxia couldn't help but stare at the voluptuous figure in front of him. Who knew that the Snow Empress seemed to have eyes on the back of her head? She giggled. "Is it good looking? How is my figure compared to the women in the immortal world who enjoy the sunlight, rain and morning mist?" Xianxia's gaze quickly moved away from the voluptuous buttocks. He awkwardly sucked up to her. "Of course the Snow Empress is better. Bootlicker." The Snow Empress kept cursing, but she still asked with great interest, "That Ji Wu who is about to become the Immortal Empress of the Immortal Palace, since she can gain Jintai's favor, her looks must be extraordinary and rare. Compared to her, am I far from her?" This was the mentality of a woman. She still had to ask questions after cursing. Xianxia had seen Ji Wu before, and she was indeed much prettier than the Snow Empress. However, how could Xianxia speak the truth? If he said that another woman was prettier than her in front of her, wouldn't that be asking for trouble? He immediately said solemnly, "Although she is beautiful compared to the Snow Empress, she is still slightly inferior." "Go away." The Snow Empress spat and scolded with a smile. "Nonsense, bootlicker. Jintai's standards aren't so low." Although she scolded, the joy in her laughter wasn't concealed. It could be seen that she was a woman who dared to love and hate. In the end, the two of them kept on mocking each other and sucking up to each other until they reached the entrance of the ice palace. The wind and snow outside had already stopped. It was a pity that there wasn't any sunlight. Otherwise, it would be a rare snowy scene. Xianxia was wondering why she brought him out, but he saw the ice princess working on an ice flower amidst the rainbow formed by various ice spirits. The two of them walked behind the ice princess. The ice princess was so focused that she didn't even turn her head. Xianxia couldn't help but stretch out his head to take a look. He wanted to see what kind of flower the other party was carving. In the end, it was a flower that looked a bit like a butterfly. He searched through his mind and he even thought back to the patterns in the rare treasures mirror, but he still couldn't see what kind of flower it looked like. He sighed endlessly in his heart. The netherworld really was vast and had all kinds of strange things. Linglong, what flower are you sculpting? The Snow Empress stood behind the Ice Princess and asked gently. It was a mother's love for her daughter. Xue Linglong paused and thought for a while. She smiled and said, Rose. The Snow Empress' smile froze. Ah! Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but exclaim. He felt like he was struck by lightning. He looked at the flower that looked like a butterfly but not a butterfly. His eyes were filled with disbelief. This was actually a rose? Then he looked at his two mothers who turned around to look at him and smiled apologetically. He giggled foolishly and said, I'm ignorant and ill-informed. So the rose of the underworld looks like this. I've learned a lot. There's no sunlight or rain in the netherworld, so roses can't grow. This is the celestial world's rose. Xue Linglong muttered shyly. Yu Qianqiu was shocked again. He pointed at the ice flower and said in shock, You've never been to the celestial world? How can the celestial world's rose look like this? Pa! The Snow Empress moved as fast as lightning and slapped the back of his outstretched hand. She scolded, My daughter says roses are like this, so they are like this. Do I need you to talk so much? Chapter 10:21. Yu Qianqiu sucked in a breath of cold air and retracted his hand in pain. He didn't know what was wrong with this woman. Did she have to be like this with just one sentence? But seeing the anger on her face and Xue Linglong's sobbing face, he vaguely guessed something. He swallowed back the vulgarities that were about to come out of his mouth. Then looking at the strangely shaped ice flowers around, his expression twitched. He thought they were some strange flowers from the netherworld. But now that he thought about it, it seemed like Xue Linglong had created them out of thin air. Maybe that crab-like flower was the legendary peony flower. I can't see the sunlight, so I've never been to the celestial world. Xue Linglong murmured, then looked up at Yu Qianqiu and asked, Can you tell me what a rose looks like? Snow Empress hugged her in her arms with heartache. She forced a smile and comforted, If there's a chance, your father and I will definitely take you to the celestial world to see. Yu Qianqiu looked at the two mothers and hesitated for a while. Finally, he couldn't help but ask, With Princess's cultivation, it shouldn't be a problem to go to the celestial world, right? Why can't you see the sunlight? It's all your celestial world people's doing. The Snow Empress turned her head and scolded. She couldn't hold back her tears anymore. The teardrops that rolled down her charming face were really pitiful and moving. Mother, I'm fine. I don't want to go to the celestial world. Xue Linglong's tears also flowed down, but she hurriedly wiped her mother's tears. In the end, the two of them hugged each other and cried. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and looked at the entrance of the ice palace in a panic. He was really worried that Snow Empress would misunderstand after seeing this scene. If that happened, she wouldn't think that he bullied her wife and daughter. She would definitely fight him to the death. I heard that Princess was injured by someone in the celestial world and hasn't recovered yet. Princess can't go to the celestial world because of your injury? Yu Qianqiu asked the question in his heart. In order to stop the mother and daughter from crying any further, he tried to ask, Can you tell me what exactly is going on? However, at the mention of this, the Snow Empress seemed to recall some sad past events and cried until her shoulders trembled. Yu Qianqiu immediately panicked. If this continued, the Snow Empress would really misunderstand. He rolled his eyes and no one knew what he was thinking. He stretched out his hand and as if he was performing a magic trick, a beautiful red rose appeared in his hand. He handed it over to the mother and daughter pair, bringing a wisp of fragrance with it. This is... Xue Linglong's eyes lit up. She was attracted by the beautiful flowers. Snow Empress raised her head slightly and exclaimed, Roses. Xue Linglong was pleasantly surprised. This is a rose? So beautiful. Without waiting for Yu Qianqiu's consent, he grabbed it and placed it between his nose and mouth, smelling its fragrance with an intoxicated look on his face. Seeing that the mother and daughter finally stopped crying, Yu Qianqiu instantly chuckled proudly and said, Coincidentally, I'm also a flower lover, so I brought some roses with me. He looked like a flower thief teasing the mother and daughter. His words sounded better than singing, but in reality he had remembered that Utopia had planted all sorts of flowers, so he casually picked a rose. Speaking of which, he had to thank Guan Yu. Back then, when Yu Qianqiu first came to the 100 Flowers Valley with Guan Yu had bought many kinds of flower seeds from the 100 Flowers Valley and planted them in Utopia's flower fields. Now he casually picked it to fool people. However, he only felt proud for a while before the smile on his face froze. The rose in Shui Linglong's hand was turning black at a visible speed, then slowly withering. In the end, it turned into ashes and disappeared with the wind. Shui Linglong held some ashes in her hands and shouted in panic, "Mother, mother, my rose." She was helpless and seemed to want to beg her mother to help her save the lost rose. However, Snow Empress was also helpless. Otherwise, her daughter would have seen a rose. Snow Empress's face was full of heartache. She grabbed her daughter's hands and didn't know what to say. Sigh. A sigh sounded behind Yu Qianqiu helplessly. Yu Qianqiu suddenly looked back and realized that it was none other than Snow Empress. He didn't know when she had come behind him, but she clearly knew what had happened. "Thank you for your kindness." Snow Empress patted Yu Qianqiu's shoulder and smiled bitterly. "The netherworld and the celestial world are different. The difference is between life and death. This distance is an insurmountable gap, an insurmountable law of heaven and earth. The netherworld is full of death. The flowers and plants in the celestial world can't survive here and will turn into ashes in the blink of an eye. But the celestial world is full of life. Most of the flowers and plants in the netherworld will have the same ending in the celestial world. Cultivation is something that goes against the natural law of heaven and earth. Unlike cultivators like me who go against the natural law, we can freely travel between the celestial world and the netherworld when we reach a certain realm. Do you understand what I mean?" Yu Qianqiu nodded thoughtfully. He recalled the scene when he had collected the resurrection grass in front of the gate to the netherworld. The resurrection grass had turned to dust the moment it came into contact with life. It was exactly as the Snow Empress had said. But it was also because he remembered the scene of collecting the resurrection grass that his eyes lit up. He clapped his hands and cheered, "I have a way to let the princess enjoy all kinds of beautiful flowers in the celestial world." The family of three perked up immediately. Snow Empress and Snow Emperor asked in surprise, "What way?" "Seal it with ice. We can use ice to seal the flowers in the celestial world and bring them to the netherworld. This way, as long as the ice does not melt, the death qi will not invade. The flowers will never wither and Princess Linglong will be able to enjoy them forever," Yu Qianqiu said happily. This was because he had used the same method to collect the resurrection grass. Shui Linglong nodded excitedly, but Snow Empress and Snow Emperor's expressions were a little gloomy. Yu Qianqiu was stunned and said, "Won't this method work?" Snow Empress smiled bitterly and shook her head. "The frozen snow dance is a spell that my wife and I are proficient in. How could we not think of this method? If it's really useful, let alone a mere rose, even freezing thousands of miles in an instant wouldn't be a difficult task for me and my wife. But my wife and I are, after all, high-level cultivators of the netherworld. The death aura inside the ice we cast is even stronger than the death aura in the air of the netherworld. A mere rose will immediately turn into ashes as soon as it touches it. How can it be of any use?" "So that's how it is." That's not right." Yu Qianqiu scratched his face and said suspiciously, "I once saw someone use ice to seal a resurrection grass and bring it back to the celestial world. According to Snow Empress, if the people in the celestial world use the frozen snow technique, the ice should contain life. Why didn't the resurrection grass turn into ashes?" The resurrection grass is not an ordinary flower in the netherworld. It has an ancient name, yin yang grass. Snow Empress explained, "The most ancient saying is that there were originally only two realms, yin and yang. It refers to the human world and the netherworld. At that time the human world was only called the yang realm. All living beings were equal and there was no such name as the human world. Later humans gradually stood out from all living beings and became the rulers of the yang realm. In order to show that humans were superior to other living beings, they called the yang realm the human world. The dead of the yang realm go to the netherworld, and those who transcend the netherworld go to the yang realm to be reincarnated as all kinds of living beings. The ancient method called it fate and reincarnation. It goes back and forth in an endless cycle. But later, as the living beings multiply, some of them comprehend to break the cycle of yin and yang, and transcend the divination of life and death. They pursue eternal life and disdain to live together with ordinary living beings. Therefore, based on their comprehension, they opened up other spaces to reside in, which are the various spaces like the celestial world, and the demon world. And the resurrection grass cannot exist in other spaces. It only grows at the intersection of the yin and yang realms, which is also the intersection of the human world and the netherworld. Not only does it have magical effects, but more importantly, it shows the inalienable ancient status of the human world and the netherworld. Therefore, the resurrection grass has some characteristics that are different from other things. It does not grow in solitary yang and does not grow in solitary yin. It is not something from the pure yin realm, nor is it something from the pure yang realm. It can bear the weight of yin and yang, which is really mysterious. And only it can be like what you said, sealed in ice and brought to the human world or the netherworld. But even so, it will not stay in the yin and yang realms for more than 7 days. Once it exceeds 7 days, it will immediately turn into ashes. At this point, the Snow Empress sighed and said, "Now you should understand why even with the cultivation of us husband and wife, we are unable to bring flowers and plants from the outside world to the netherworld, right? It is not that we do not want to do it, but we cannot resist it. This is the eternal law of heaven and earth. Our cultivation is too insignificant in front of the law of heaven and earth." So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. He felt that this trip to the ice palace was not in vain. He had more or less gained some knowledge. Maybe it would be beneficial to his future cultivation. Then he looked at the desolate Xue Linglong and asked, "Snow Empress, may I ask who in the celestial realm injured the princess? What kind of injury did she suffer? Why can't she recover after such a long time?" Hearing this, the couple's faces were filled with anger. The Snow Empress gritted her teeth and said, "This person was one of the 12 great celestial monarchs under Jin Tai. His name is Fire Virtue Celestial Monarch. Later, because his cultivation increased to the late stage of Celestial Emperor, Jin Tai was worried that he would threaten his ruling position in the celestial realm, so he suppressed him. He also fought back, but in the end he was still no match for Celestial Emperor. However, he had already kept a trump card in the dark. Just when he was about to die in the hands of Kinta, he suddenly used the hidden Samadhi True Fire to block Kinta's pursuit and escaped to the netherworld. Chapter 1022. True Samadhi Fire? Yu Qianqiu was startled. This name was too familiar. He immediately reacted and exclaimed, "You mean True Samadhi Fire?" "Yes. It's the True Samadhi Fire that shook the 3 realms and was known to be invincible." Jin Tai didn't expect that old thief Fire Virtue had actually cultivated the True Samadhi Fire. He was almost severely injured by him, which was why he escaped to the netherworld, Snow Emperor said angrily. He had always heard of the power of True Samadhi Fire, but had never seen it for himself. Yu Qianqiu suppressed his excitement and asked, "What happened next? Where did that Fire Virtue Immortal Lord escape to?" He had been hot-headed and wanted to ask Fire Virtue Immortal Lord about the mysteries of True Samadhi Fire. Snow Empress squinted at him and said unhappily, "Dead." Dead? How could he be dead? At this point, Yu Qianqiu immediately realized that there was something wrong with his words. He waved his hand awkwardly and explained, "Don't misunderstand, I just heard that True Samadhi Fire is very powerful. I'm afraid he was not so easy to kill. Fortunately, he had a good attitude before." The Snow Empress calmed her emotions and slowly said in a deep voice, "After Huoda escaped into the netherworld, Jin Tai also chased after him. The 2 of them fought again in the netherworld, but Huoda relied on the power of the Samadhi True Fire, and Jin Tai couldn't do anything to him in a short time. However, the underworld is the territory of the Underworld Emperor. After the 2 of them caused such a big commotion, the Underworld Emperor was alerted. If it was someone else, the Underworld Emperor might not have intervened personally. But when he saw that it was Jin Tai who was causing trouble in his territory, he immediately rebuked Jin Tai and fought him on the spot. In the end, Fire Virtue escaped with his life. Snow Empress, who was holding her frightened daughter, interrupted with grief and indignation, "My wife and I have always been aloof from worldly affairs. Who knew that those people's fights would affect us? When Fire Virtue had nowhere to run, he passed by the snowy mountain and targeted us. He wanted to use our Ice Soul Mystic weapons to fight against Jin Tai. My wife and I had never participated in any of the battles between the Immortal and Netherworld realms, so naturally we were unwilling to agree. As a result, the 2 of us began to fight. However, the True Samadhi Fire was naturally able to restrain the 2 of us. The 2 of us were no match for it at all. That bastard is inhuman." Snow Empress clenched her fists, her eyes bulging. Linglong was such a small child, yet he was so cruel that he could plant a wisp of True Samadhi Fire in her body to threaten us. Yu Qianqiu sighed silently, not knowing what to say. Although Fire Virtue Immortal Lord was in the wrong, anyone would throw caution to the wind when forced to such a state. Even a rabbit would bite when cornered. If my wife and you were forced, you I Jintai I Fire Virtue you I Chi Snow Empress wept and said, just as we were in a dilemma, Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qing happened to pass by. After he understood our dispute, he feigned civility to Fire Virtue Immortal Lord, saying that he would help him deal with Jin Tai. Finally, when he let his guard down, he used sword unsheathing and killed Fire Virtue in one move, saving Ling Long. Yu Qianqiu was taken aback when he heard this. He asked in surprise, Fire Virtue Immortal Monarch was killed by Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qing? Yu Qianqiu immediately understood when he saw the couple nod in tacit agreement. No wonder everyone else in the celestial dimension would suffer misfortune here, and only the people of the Heartless Palace would be spared. But on second thought his heart shuddered. Fire Virtue was able to escape from an immortal emperor, so he must be very capable. It would not be easy for an ordinary person to ambush him. This sect master Wang Qing was really not to be underestimated. A mid-stage immortal emperor dared to ambush a late-stage immortal emperor. Just this courage alone was not something an ordinary person could compare to. No wonder Heartless Palace could become the #1 sect in the immortal realm. Thinking that Fire Virtue Immortal Lord was already dead, he could not help but feel slightly disappointed. However, his eyes inadvertently glanced at Xue Linglong, and his eyes immediately lit up. Princess has yet to recover from her injuries. Could it be that the wisp of true Samadhi fire that old thief Fire Virtue planted in Princess Linglong's body still exists? Snow Empress said sadly, the Samadhi true fire cannot be created or extinguished. Unless someone can absorb it, it will not be extinguished until the carrier is completely burned. My wife and I are useless, watching our daughter suffer but unable to eradicate it. We can only do our best to lessen her pain. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and touched his chin. That is to say, you have a way to suppress the Samadhi true fire. What is it? But as soon as he said this, the couple became vigilant. They felt they spoke too much due to their agitated emotions. Then they hid their sorrowful expressions and refused to say anything. Snow Empress hugged her daughter and persuaded Yu Qianqiu to go rest. Yu Qianqiu felt that there was probably some secret involved in this. He knew he wouldn't be able to get any more information from them. He smiled and cupped his hands at the family of 3. Then he turned and walked into the ice palace. However, before he could take a few steps, he suddenly heard a muffled groan behind him. Looking back, he saw that Xue Linglong's body was covered in a layer of colorful light. Her eyes were closed and she fell into her mother's arms. Snow Emperor and Snow Empress expressions changed. They didn't even look at Yu Qianqiu. Holding hands, they carried Xue Linglong and entered the ice palace. Yu Qianqiu stood alone on the ice cliff for a while. He touched his chin and mumbled to himself, is the injury of the Samadhi true fire acting up? He paced around the ice cliff for a while with his hands behind his back. He thought that if he could take the opportunity to see the Samadhi true fire, it would definitely be beneficial for him to merge it in the future. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to touch the threshold if he didn't understand the Samadhi true fire at all. Making up his mind, Yu Qianqiu flashed to the entrance of the ice palace. Then he lightened his footsteps and walked in slowly. The ice palace shone a magnificent sapphire blue. It made one feel relaxed and happy. When Yu Qianqiu walked to the center of the hall, he hesitated for a while. Finally, he gritted his teeth and walked into the depths of the ice palace. After walking along the passageway of the back hall for tens of meters, he saw a 3-meter-wide spiral staircase. There were no other entrances or exits on either side. He controlled his pace as he walked up, afraid that he would cause a misunderstanding. This ascending passageway was at least 100 meters high. He didn't know why this family made the staircase so long. When he reached the top, he realized that it was an arched hall that was nearly 20 meters high. The size of the hall was less than half of the main hall below. However, from the carvings on the walls, it gave off a warm and homey feeling. A corridor ran from the center of the circular hall to both sides. He stood in the middle and looked at both sides. There were a few entrances on both sides of the corridor. He didn't know which one the family was in. Just as he was hesitating whether he should release his divine sense to investigate, he suddenly realized that there was a strange light shining at the entrance of a room on the right side of the corridor. He immediately walked over. When he reached the door of the room, he realized that it was the same as the room below. Although there was no door, the door was curved and he couldn't see the situation inside. He wanted to barge in directly, but he was afraid of causing unnecessary trouble. The couple must be treating their daughter's injuries. After thinking about it, he walked to the wall opposite the room, turned around and sat down cross-legged with his eyes closed. After a few hours, the Snow Emperor's gloomy voice suddenly sounded in front of him. "What are you doing barging in here?" Xianxia opened his eyes and saw that the Snow Emperor's face was slightly pale. Her eyes that were staring at him were full of haze, as if she was about to explode. He immediately stood up and cupped his hands, saying, "I'm guessing that the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress are treating Princess Linglong's injuries, and are afraid that someone will barge in. So I'm guarding your door to help protect you. Can be considered as a little help. I hope the Snow Emperor doesn't misunderstand. I definitely don't have any other intentions." "Protect." The Snow Emperor snorted coldly, indicating that she didn't believe him. In fact, the couple had long heard the sound of Xianxia coming up. However, they were at the critical moment of treating their daughter's injuries, and really couldn't divert their attention to stop him. They were really afraid that Xianxia would take the opportunity to cause trouble, and then their daughter would be in danger. Luckily, Xianxia paced around the door for a while, then sat down and didn't move, indicating that he didn't have any enmity. However, it still made the couple worried for a while. The Snow Empress regretted luring this group of people to the Ice Palace. At this moment, the Snow Empress also walked out with a pale face. She said in a low voice, "There's no need to protect me. You barged into a place that you shouldn't have. On account of Wang Qing, I won't make things difficult for you. Bring your people and scram." "Damn it. Heartless bitch who turned hostile. To think that I praised you like a flower." Xianxia cursed silently. If it was before, he would definitely be eager to leave. However, the true Samadhi fire was indeed attractive to him, so he didn't want to leave now. His expression was slightly solemn as he said, "Originally, I was still thinking that perhaps I have a way to treat your daughter's injuries, so I wanted to give it a try. However, since the Snow Empress has put it this way, then I have nothing else to say. Farewell." He cupped his hands and walked out with large strides. The couple looked at each other when they heard that. Although they didn't believe that he could treat their daughter's injuries, there might be hope. Even if it was a slim hope, they still wanted to give it a try. "Wait." The Snow Empress raised her hand and said. Xianxia sneered in his heart. "Do you really think that I'm polite to you people for no reason?" He acted as if he didn't hear anything and just walked on his own. The Snow Empress' expression twitched. She bit her lips and teleported in front of Xianxia. She bowed and said, "I was rash just now and offended you with my words. I hope that Mr. will forgive me and not take it to heart." A mother's love had always been great. For the safety of her children, how could she not put down a bit of her pride? At this moment, the Snow Empress also flashed over and cupped her hands at Xianxia. "Mister, you said that you have a way to treat my daughter's injuries. I wonder if it's true?" He also changed the way he addressed him to Mr. "Don't stand on ceremony. I only said that perhaps, and I want to give it a try. I can't give a definite guarantee." Xianxia smiled faintly. He raised his right hand and opened his palm. A ball of dazzling green flame suddenly appeared in his palm,